All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being on time and ready to roll. And again, for your commitment to our mission. So thank you very much for being here. We'll start with the roll call. Tony Badoni. Here. Stephanie Caldwell. Here. Sarah Cameron. Here. Maruja Calense. Amy Cotia. Thank you. Jorge De Leon. Here. Thank you. Evaristo Escoto? No. Oscar Gomez. Here. Thank you. Catherine Heller. Here. Kevin Herrera. Here. Kristen Ippolito. Melanie Lindsay. Sandy Lamali Harrison. Here. Peggy Mariansky here. Sarah McLaughlin. Kathleen Mundo Garafa. Carol Peak. Andrea Rodriguez. Sydney Traub. Emmanuel Velasquez. Here. Annette Walters. Here. Monica West. Here. Stacy Whitaker. Here. Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. I need a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight. Thank you. And a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Oh, I didn't notice, Marie, any public comments?
No public comment.
No
Thank
public
you.
comments for today. Okay. It's too hot to get out here. And we have a consent calendar of minutes from last meeting, the June 18th meeting, which are attached. If anyone has had a chance to look at those and can make a motion to pass or to adopt those. Or I guess we would adopt the whole calendar, which includes the ad hoc committee, formation of the ad hoc committee. Is that? We could do the minutes first. Do them separately? Yes. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I'll move to adopt that to approve minutes.
Thank you. All in favor? And opposed? Okay. Then the second item on the consent calendar is the ad hoc committee for board report preparation. So do we need a motion to form the committee or?
We have to either take.
The committee could take volunteers for the ad hoc committee to write the report to the board, or you can nominate your fellow committee members. So if you'd like to discuss or think about it for a couple minutes.
Okay, so the existence of the committee is already established. Now we're just looking for people who will.
Right,
okay.
like a subcommittee almost.
Okay.
I mean, in the bond oversight committee, we had about 3 people, maybe 3 or 4. So it's really a subgroup of this committee that kind of puts together the final report and the board presentation and then brings it back to this group as a whole. So that way the whole committee is not actively working on this report. And so then when it gets presented to this committee as a whole, then this committee reviews it and makes edits as needed and then finalizes it and then it gets presented to the board.
Does the person who's on the ad hoc committee have to present to the board?
Normally, who presents to the board is the chair, the vice chair, and whoever else would like to attend.
But we all are in consensus before? I mean, is it that?
Yeah, so the ad hoc committee essentially gives, I guess, drafts a rough draft of the report, right, and brings it back to this committee to review and to make changes. And then once you finalize it as a whole committee, the full group, then we take it to the board.
But the decision about what the committee is writing has been made by the entire committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yes.
So it's just the work of it. Okay, thank you. Jorge?
From past experience and other presentations, the committee, what they do is they get all the information and we look for clarity, so when we present that, it's more clear for the, for the board members. but obviously it gets reviewed by this group as well. But it's not, it's more of it, where when you do the presentation, it's going to be clear not only for the board, but also for the members of the public. Because, we look at it with that set of eyes versus this set of eyes.
Yeah.
This set of eyes is, a whole different set, but having some sort of information or knowledge about what was discussed in these meetings that we're having today is very valuable. So because it's another second set of eyes to make sure that the presentation is accurate and not somewhere else.
And well justified is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
So what's been happening in the background is after each meeting, staff, me, myself, and others go back after the next morning and kind of recreate what happened here, what was discussed based off of the meeting minute notes, based on the questions that we get from the public, and based on your guys' discussion here. And so what we've been doing is compiling that after each meeting. And so essentially, hopefully after tonight and the next summary meeting, we should have somewhat of a template for this committee to consider. And so we would present that. I would give that to the chair, and then she would bring that back to the rest of the group to go through and see if you want to make changes to the structure. Do you want to add something? Do you feel something's missing from this? And go about it like that.
Okay. So I like that. I like the concept of like a first draft. That makes sense to me. Sandy?
That's what I was going to ask, if there was a template already, or if we were going to also be responsible for doing that.
So we've got the template from School Services California.
Okay.
They've worked with other districts that went through school closure. So essentially, it's recapping every single meeting, what was discussed, the presentations that were given, the scoring and ranking that was discussed at each committee, or each meeting, and each criteria laid out. And then attached to that would be every single presentation, all the appendix, that would all go in the appendix.
Even though that's already been presented to the school board.
It has been, yeah.
Okay. Melanie?
So I'm just going to throw this out there as a former English teacher / person who has written WASC reports. I will volunteer to write, but I do not want to present. So
Yeah.
I'll just throw that out there.
Okay,
I'll volunteer
perfect.
to be part of
Yeah.
the writing process.
Thank you.
I was going to volunteer as well. I've written multiple.
Yeah, I
reports.
wonder if, can we just see how many people would like to volunteer? And if it's too many, then we'll have to go to a different system? Is it possible to change course?
Yeah, there's no set structure as how many people this committee decides that. So if you feel like you have enough volunteers, then so be it.
Okay. And two, I know, as a writer, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Because that can be just hard to move forward. So let's just, if you have an idea, I would like to sit on that ad hoc committee to help write the report and present it. Can you just show of hands? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't see this side. Okay, 4. Okay. Well, do we feel comfortable with a group of 4 for that task? Okay, I'm seeing agreement. Okay, did you get that? The volunteers? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for volunteering. And actually, I didn't get it, so sorry, I didn't even get a pen out.
So confirming our
Thanks.
volunteers are Melanie, Sandy, Jorge, and Stephanie.
Okay. Thank you. Perfect. Oh, I do have one. I just wasn't prepared. Then I will get in touch with you about how we can gather together and move forward. Okay. Thank you. Okay. It looks like then we are ready for the presentation of fiscal services and other impacts.
Okay, so tonight we have several presenters. We have first Ari Weiberg, our transportation director, will present on all things transportations, kind of go over the walk zones, how many students ride at each site, how many gen ed, sped, how many drivers he has, kind of go over his world. Then we have Eric Reynolds, our risk management director that will go over crosswalk safety concerns at each site. And then our fiscal director, Joey Brunel, and myself will present the budget, where our financial outlook is for right now. And we'll go over, like, at each site, what the cost savings would be to look at potential closure of a site. So with that, we'll start with Ari. Want to pass this in? Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. Let's figure this out here. Perfect. Okay, first thing I'll talk about is walk zones. And right now, this is part of board policy. So as you can see, grades kindergarten through third grade, if they live within 3/4 of a mile to the school, then we do not have buses for that area. If they live outside of that, still within the school boundary, then we would probably have a bus stop for that age. And board policy also says if they're in 4th or 5th grade, they have to live a mile out of the school. However, right now, as long as we have room on the buses, we're letting the 4th and 5th graders ride along with the K through 3 if they live in that 1/4 mile distance. For middle school, 6th through 8th grade, they have to live more than 2 miles away from the school to qualify for transportation, and high school is 3 miles to qualify. And for the schools of choice, they do not qualify for transportation. And we do have a few exceptions, such as Data Middle School. We do bring kids into Data Middle School. We take kids to Foothill. And there's a few exceptions where we do, but for the most part, school of choice does not qualify for transportation. So that's pretty basic. Any questions about walk zones? Yes.
How are how's the distance determined? Just curious.
So we have a routing system called Traversa, and we have that set so you can see it on a map, and we'll get to those maps pretty soon, but it kind of just, I don't know how it does it, but it's a zigzag kind of a thing. It's not a square map or anything like that, but you'll be able to see that, and so our computer tells us if they live outside or inside the walk zone. All righty.
So you mentioned that if K3 and 4, 5, you've been making exceptions if they lived a little bit outside that walk zone, you still have been transporting them. So these families and students meet you at designated bus stops that are already existing, or are you creating new stops for?
Already existing. So usually the 4th grader was in 3rd grade last year and they rode the bus. And if they live within that 1/4 mile difference, we still let them ride to the same bus stop that they've always ridden. Yeah, we don't create new bus stops for them. They just keep riding where they've been riding. All right. And if I know there's a lot of information in this stuff, so just interrupt me and ask your questions because it's a lot of stuff. Okay, so this next slide is just a spreadsheet and is an overall snapshot of how many students and routes that we have. So if you look at the first one, which is Atlas School, in K through 3, we transport 53 children. In grades 4 to 5, we transport 50. And grades 6 through 8, we transport 26. And so Atlas is another exception where technically most kids in the 6th through 8th grade live more than or less than 2 miles away from the school, so they should be walking. But since we have room on the buses, we let the 6th and 8th graders ride as long as they get to an existing stop. Obviously no high schoolers there. General ed routes, we have 2 routes that service Atlas School. We have 0 sped students that go there, 0 sped routes, so a total of 2 drivers that drive to Atlas. You see there J. Sarah. J. Sarah doesn't have any regular ed transportation. They're all zeros. So we have no general ed routes going to J. Sarah, but we do have special ed students going there with one special ed bus. And so it's a total of one driver. Lemon Grove's the same. We do not have any general ed transportation going there. Montalvo, Mound, and Portola. We have zero buses, zero big buses going to those schools. One thing I guess I should say that we do have it broken up here by general ed and special ed routes. So if the committee did determine to close one of the schools that has special ed students at it, the special ed students, they don't fall into the walk zones. We will always provide a bus for the special ed students. So if they were going to J. Sarah and that's one of the schools that you chose to close, then we would transport to the new school that they're going to, Juana Maria or wherever it is. So hopefully, does that make sense how the SPED works? So the SPED students will follow, if they close one of the schools that the SPED students go to, we will still take the SPED students to whatever new school. So the general ed students, that would fall into the walk zone.
But if you close that school, they would be outside of that walk zone.
Possibly, yes. So then, yes, that would create more general ed routes. The special ed routes probably wouldn't create more drivers, but the general ed routes would probably create more. But it still would fall into, we would still use the walk zones to determine who qualifies. Some of the schools probably aren't 2 miles apart, So it just depends on that.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
No, go ahead.
Aren't some of the walk zone is an arbitrary choice, isn't it? It can be changed.
It's board policy now, but yes, the board could vote to change it if they wanted to.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. That was one of the things I was just going to provide some additional information. So I wouldn't use the term arbitrary because in that only that it was determined, like it was set in board policy, but yes, it can be changed, right? So it was purposeful. And then that addresses the similar question about, is it necessarily true that just because you close a school that everyone will need to walk? No. And then Ari did a really nice job addressing that if they're outside of the established board policy, yes, we would generally transport. The last thing about the special education is, this is not just for this conversation, this is for all conversations. Special education is a specialized service, and that transportation, if it is noted in the child's IEP, the district is obligated to provide that transportation. So as you go through this conversation thinking about schools and proximities, that's important generally, but as it relates to students with disabilities, we will have an obligation to transport them wherever they are. So as you consider which schools should be recommended, not just to close, but the schools that are being recommended to receive students, either way, the students with disabilities, we are obligated to transport them regardless of which school they attend.
So I don't want to go over every name here, but or every school.
I'm sorry, Ari, I'm going to interrupt you one more time.
Yeah.
I don't have great peripheral vision, clearly. Stacy.
I'll dance next time. I just want to clarify that the students where we have 0 that are taking the buses in gen ed, does that mean everybody that's attending that school is within walking boundary of that school?
Yes, correct.
Right.
Or school of choice, yeah.
Or school of choice, or they are going to an existing route outside of their area, right? Couldn't they be transported that way?
Well, like if they were going to J. Sarah, we don't have any buses going there, so even if they wanted to grab a bus, they could not because we don't have any buses going there.
Is that because there is no need, or what is the reason there are no buses?
Most of it's because they live in the school's small enough that everybody lives in the walk zone. And like, I think it's Montalvo, that is a pure school of choice. It doesn't really have or no, maybe that's Mound. That's Mound. Mound doesn't even have a school boundary, so everybody that goes to Mound is school of choice. So that's why we don't have a bus going to Mound.
So how many stops does a school bus make for elementary school route, generally?
Oh, every route varies.
They vary. So
Yeah.
adding a stop to a bus that isn't already full might not have the same impact as having to add a whole route.
Correct.
So if
We
close
run
a
into
school,
problems with
you know,
time.
yeah.
I don't know if we-
Time. Okay, time. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
because we have a very short time to get the high school kids to school and then the elementary kids in the middle school. So if we had too many stops, then we're late to the other schools. So there's,
Approximately how many routes does a single driver drive?
usually the drivers drive one route, what we call it. But they might pick up, they start at Ventura High School, pick up maybe, and then they'll drop off the Ventura kids, and then they'll go pick up elementary kids, drop them off, and then they'll pick up middle school kids to drop them off.
So one bus driver might drive all 3 levels
Yes.
of kids.
Yeah,
So it's not, this total drivers is not every driver only drives one route.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We call those runs. So one driver might have, one route might have 3 runs in the morning. Yeah. Okay. Next slide is the same as this page, except it shows our middle schools and high schools. So again, I'll just go over Balboa really quick here, but obviously no younger kids from 6th to 8th grade. We have 310 that ride the bus, and that we can do that in 5 routes. There's 18 special ed students that go there with 5 routes, a total of 10 drivers that it takes us to service Balboa. And then high school, you can see as well. So any questions on those?
Foothill's not considered a school of choice?
Foothill is school of choice, except that's one of the exceptions. So the way we get those kids to school is if Ventura is their home school, if they live within the walk zone, they need to walk to Ventura, and then we have a shuttle that goes from Ventura to Foothill. If they live outside of the walk zone, they would get on their regular Ventura High School bus stop. We take them to Ventura, and then they get on the shuttle and go to Foothill. Yeah, that's the way data works as well. Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean every day, but they ride some high school. Sometimes they ride, sometimes they don't, or they have sports for a few months. So it's not every day, but yeah, 42 kids are routed, we should say.
Wrapped up in this, Annette, thank you.
That's okay. Just curious why it's 9 routes, just because of what you stated, them going to Ventura and being shuttled over? Is that why? It just seems like there's
Yeah.
a lot of routes for.
That's a lot of routes.
Yeah.
So the reason is because in the afternoon, we bring them from Foothill to their high schools, and then they get on their high school routes and go. So they get on a lot of different buses on the way there.
And Amy?
I think I answered my own question, but I was just wondering why there were so many more drivers needed for data when there's so many fewer kids, but I think it has to do with the special education students, or?
Oh, the 13 drivers?
Yes.
Well, we have 7, so like Data and Foothill, those are shuttle schools. So we have lots of buses to get them to the shuttle. We have 1 bus going from each each middle school to Data, so that's Cabrillo, that's 3. And then there's also buses that bring them to their home school. So that's why you see a lot of those. The 6 routes, that's all over our district for the special ed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So are these, I'm assuming, different size vehicles, right? So you're talking about large buses, and then you were talking about shuttles. Are they
We
different
call it a shuttle, but
sizes?
it's still the large school bus.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, thanks.
The special ed buses, for the most part, are the small 24 passenger buses, but all the shuttles, we call them, they are the large buses, yeah. And then I'll just say, we don't have Ventura and Buena on the bottom for high schools, but that's where all the special ed classes go, to Ventura and Buena. So that's why these El Camino, Foothill, and Pacific don't show any special ed routes on there.
Cindy, is that the last of your questions? Thank you.
And if I could just clarify Ari's last statements. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sure. There's a distinction between students with disabilities that have transportation as a designated service in their IEP, and most of our students with disabilities do not have special education designated transportation in their IEP. So when we're talking about the fact, like when Ari said all of the students with disabilities are going to those schools, those are all of the students who have a designated service of transportation on their IEP that are going to those schools. So I just wanted to offer that clarification.
Thank you. My world's just transportation, so I
That's an important distinction.
we
I think.
transport about 350 children on the special ed routes.
Okay, Tony?
This is a little complicated, but if a student is going to a school and that school is decided this to be closed, and that student, I know that there will be different boundaries drawn or however that works out, but if this student doesn't want to go to the school that is now designated for them, or their parents don't want them to, but they want to go to this other school that's not one of the choice schools, do they have that opportunity? So let's say, just out of weirdness, you know, you close Juana Maria and some of those kids want to go to Junipero Serra, but they're really supposed to go over here to this other school. Will they have that choice, and how does that affect transportation if they do? I don't know if they have
So
that
all
choice.
of our schools are schools of choice now. In the past, they weren't, but all of our schools, they have the opportunity to do school of choice now. But Ari can answer how that, if someone goes to a school of choice, do they have transportation?
Yeah, so if they don't go to their home assigned school, then they would not qualify for transportation.
Thank you.
All righty. So these next slides are just some example of the maps and the walk zones. So this first one is Atlas. And it's kind of hard to see because they have a really large school boundary, but the green is the school boundary, and in the bluish color where it says Atlas K-3 walk zone, or WZ, that is the walk zone. So when we're routing, if a child lived maybe up there on Foothill Road and Wells Road, they're in the green, but they're out of the walk zone, so we would have a bus stop for those children to take them to Atlas. So anybody that lived out of the blue area that still lived in the green area would get a bus. And then on the right, that first page we were looking at that had the summary, that's just for this school, so you can see that with the map as well. So that's Atlas. I'll just go through a couple of these, but Citrus Glen, their boundary skips. So their Citrus Glen enrollment boundary, so EB is enrollment boundary, which is the blue color, and the salmon color is the walk zone. So if they lived within that salmon color, they do not qualify for transportation, and anybody living in the blue color would qualify, and we have bus stops for them. We good? Okay, I'll do one more here in elementary and then we'll go to middle school. But same thing here with Elmhurst. So Elmhurst, the enrollment boundary is the salmon color. So Elmhurst EB is enrollment boundary. And Elmhurst K-3 walk zone is the blue, or it turns purple, I guess, on top of the salmon. But anybody that lived in that blue area would not qualify for transportation. And the salmon area, if they live in there, then we have a bus for them. So over to the right, you can see that we have 3 general ed routes that go to Elmhurst. And that services about 100 and something kids, whatever that equals.
Is there a marker or something on here that shows where the actual school is, or is it like slap bang in the middle of the, on any of these?
This one doesn't have it, but it's probably going to be right close to the middle of the
Close-
purple.
Okay.
Yeah, the blue area. Yes.
I'm just looking at the just out of curiosity, I noticed with Elmhurst it covers a really big area and it passes Poinsettia. So why is that Elmhurst when Poinsettia is right there? Because if you go up Victoria,
I don't follow your question. Why is what there?
well, I'm just wondering why that's a school, that's the school, their area that where they're supposed to go to school is Elmhurst, but on Victoria is Poinsettia Elementary School. So like, why is it Elmhurst when it's right there?
Oh, those are just the boundaries so the salmon color is what the board came up with a long, long time ago. And so that's what we just have in our computer.
Okay, yeah, no, I
Yeah.
just was curious as to, do you see what I'm saying now?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're understanding. I'm
And,
just
and when
wondering
we're
why.
routing, there's a lot of times where the school boundary goes down Telegraph or something, and there's a kid that lives 2 seconds away from Balboa or something, but they're assigned to a different school. So yeah, that's just the way they drew the boundaries whenever they did that.
And Tony, could you flip your card around so I'm not?
Oh, so sorry.
The boundary thing is interesting, but it really isn't our purview. But with every school being school of choice, it almost really is irrelevant, except for transportation, right? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah.
That-
Okay.
I'm asking because of transportation. So
Right.
For me, it's a valid point.
Right.
Whether I know we might not have, that's why I was asking.
Okay.
If I may, I think that the Poinsettia School is like another half a mile north of that. So that boundary is on Telegraph, not Full Hill. The Elmhurst one. So what you're looking at as far as that boundary for Elmhurst, that's Telegraph Road as far as that corner. Poinsettia is still like another half a mile north.
It's just above that, though. It's in between. It's just right up in between. So it's right. It's in between, just above one of this. Like, so it's closer, geographically it's closer. That's why I was just wondering how the boundary started to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That was way before I got here, I think.
What I can, it's not so much a suggestion as it is just an awareness, bringing attention to, although yes, drawing the boundaries is outside the purview of this committee in terms of the writing of the report and the acknowledgement of certain conditions that could affect the committee's recommendation. Absolutely, that is something that could be noted there, because not to say that it will, but if there is an incident where adjusting a boundary could shape the committee's recommendations, I think that's important to note. So again, we're here advisory for you. I'm not making recommendations. I'm just noting the fact that if that is something that the committee wanted to consider, that's absolutely within the bounds of the committee to consider that.
So making a suggestion that, okay, we close school X, and we're going to recommend this as long as you consider changing the boundary to accommodate some bus riders. That would be
That would be like a reasonable
a
suggestion.
reasonable suggestion.
Because remember, at the end of the day, the board isn't bound to the recommendations of the committee, but it is something that they're going to consider. So,
And, yeah, okay. Are we comfortable with that boundary? Okay, yeah, Stephanie.
I guess I'm going back to the same question, which is, if we are making a recommendation to close schools, wouldn't the boundaries have to change anyway?
The easy answer is no, because of school of choice. But the question about the transportation, that's affected, absolutely. But what I'm saying is the committee could make that recommendation regardless of the boundary. It could make that recommendation regardless of the transportation issue. I just wanted to note that if the issue of transportation was in some way shaping a recommendation or a lack of a recommendation that the committee wanted to make, I think that was important to note, that the concern about the transportation was somehow shaping a recommendation that the committee would or would not be comfortable making. But
So essentially, if we made a recommendation to close a school, regardless of what school, a school,
Close Balboa.
close Balboa. Let's say we close Balboa, right? That is a neighborhood school. And that school is now closed. And the district didn't draw the boundaries for the other middle schools, then essentially all of those kids would not have a homeschool, correct? How can you have some students in the district that don't have a homeschool and others do have a homeschool, and essentially those students are abandoned and don't have a transportation opportunity?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer it the way that you're asking it, but I'm going to answer it in a way that makes sense to me. We have just a few schools within the district that don't have boundaries, right? These are identified as
Schools of
pure
choice.
pure school of choice, even though broadly we have school of choice. What effectively you would do is, if the committee made the recommendation to close a school, regardless of the reason, right? There are obviously reasons and rationale for making that determination. The board then has to wrestle with all of the policies and administrative regulations that come with that recommendation. Transportation is only going to be one of many. And so that's what I'm trying to convey to the committee, is that your job is to wrestle, one of your many things that you're balancing is to wrestle all the pros and cons of making these recommendations to the board on many factors, right? And the reason that I'm answering it that way is, even though right now we are focused on transportation, when you finally come to your recommendation, it's highly unlikely that your decision to make a recommendation or not make the recommendation will be solely based on the transportation or the boundary. Most likely, there will be at least one other factor that you're also considering, and that's why I'm answering that way. That by the time you get to that point, we can obviously revisit it, and then let's wait and see if by some way you're wrestling with, we would have made the recommendation for this, but we're really hung up on this because of the transportation issue, and that's why I'm answering it that way. Like your charge is even broader than this portion of the conversation that we're having right now. Yeah.
I totally appreciate that. I just don't see how it would be equitable to have any students left out of a homeschool, when then those parents would be burdened with the transportation issue. If the district determines to close a school, I believe that the district then also has an obligation to provide those abandoned students with a home school.
Agreed, and I don't want to shape any member's belief system around that. That individual and then potentially collective belief system around that then is offered to the board about, these are our recommendation and this is where this comes from. We would have made this recommendation if we felt comfortable, but we felt that this recommendation or these sets of recommendations would have created so much inequity that we didn't feel comfortable making that recommendation. But either way, the board ultimately will be in a place of needing to accept the recommendations, and then if they do take action on that, make those related the related changes to service. And then that'll bring me to the point which you're truly asking. Beyond those schools that are identified as pure school of choice schools, that condition that you're talking about could exist with the closure of any other school. So if we started there, if we said that some inequity, small or large, would prohibit this committee from making a recommendation, you would be very limited then in terms of your decision making.
Is the district under any requirement from the state to provide certain conditions for every student in that manner?
Do you want to?
Just For transportation purposes, we're only
Not
required.
for transportation, I'm talking about homeschool versus school of choice.
Oh, I don't have an answer to that question. Yeah.
The only thing that I feel really comfortable answering based on the way you've asked the question goes back to our previous conversation about Title I students. So we have some legal obligations related to servicing Title I students. We have legal obligations related to our students with disabilities, so that's clear. I'm off the top of my head, I'm thinking about other students of protected class that we have some sort of other obligation to, and I can't think of that now, but it doesn't mean that we don't. But those are the two student groups that I know for a fact that we have legal obligations and are limited in some ways by.
And can I just add, I hear your concerns, they're all valid. They're actually concerns of ours as well. So if we collapse a school, right now we have potentially, say, just use Balboa as an example, right? We have 310 students that are utilizing transportation right now. We know out of those, we're obligated to provide special education transportations. But that's how this would look in the report. Like, the committee makes a recommendation to close X school with these considerations. The board, please consider redistricting, rebounding, remapping, and that is another process that takes place. We would have to hire district, like a demographer again, to redistrict the whole school, and that's how I would, redistrict the district, and that's how I would see that playing out, because your point's valid, and if you're adding costs by closing a school, then it kind of, like, if you're going to need to hire additional bus drivers, then you're only taking away from the cost savings of the whole school closure process anyways, right? Yeah. So then they'd have to look at the walk zones. Are we expanding the walk zone? They'd have to take a look at all of this.
Walk zone, is that a state mandate? Is that a district mandate? How was that determined?
That's district. Yeah, the district.
Based on?
The board decided that a long time ago. I don't know
Half a
what-
mile.
I don't know what
2
they
miles.
based it on, but
Okay.
there's districts that have way different walk zones.
Yeah.
And some districts don't do any general ed transportation at all. That's not required, so, yeah, there's no mandatory state
Yeah, Ari,
thing
thank you
that.
for saying that. So districts vary with what those walk zones are. Districts vary. Most districts don't provide general ed transportation at all. So that's above and beyond what we're required to do. And then Eric, I know you're not presenting yet, but are you aware of any state laws off the top of your head that provide not guidance, but specificity around how far a student can walk from a walk zone?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
And it has been recommended to the committee, but it is also possible that we say, okay, close these schools, XYZ, and maybe eliminate school of choice and just draw the boundaries. And that can also be like, right? So our recommendation can be made based on what we understand the situation to be. We don't have to keep these. We don't have to be beholden to these boundaries, which we have no control over anyway. But we could say, you must redraw the boundaries if we're going to do this. Yeah. Okay. Catherine.
So Chair, the answer to the question is yes, you absolutely could. The reason I wanted to interject just to not inhibit your creativity would be then how much of that conversation gears toward shaping the recommendation about things that are outside of the purview of the committee versus how much of that conversation relates to, based on these factors, these are the schools that we recommend closing.
Right.
And that would be the only, not caution, but just, thought in terms of how much of the time is spent on things that are truly within the purview versus things that are really, at any point, based on your recommendations, the board is going to have to wrestle with those either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're like the half step, and then the school board has to consider the larger umbrella. Okay. Catherine.
I was just curious to know if we have to have any pure school of choice schools for any legal reason, or now that we're school of choice, across the district? Like, are we legally able to limit all pure school of choice schools?
I'm going to answer just the safest answer. My belief is that we are not legally obligated. However, what's on my mind is the notification process, how, if we were to change anything, what obligations we have to notify the state in terms of the school closures, complying with anything, any requirements that the state would come up with related to that. But in terms of the district's policies related to school of choice, I don't think that there's anything legally restricting the board from changing that.
But possibly at the state level, there might be something that would come up.
I just don't want to say no definitively.
Yeah,
and then
okay.
come back and, but to
Okay.
my awareness, no.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I don't mean to belabor the topic of I understand what the purview of the committee is, et cetera, but it's very difficult to not approach it from a critical sense as to why the boundaries don't make any sense. Okay? They don't. The walking situation is even much more doesn't make any sense, because the job that you do, Ari, is my brother used to do it over in my late brother used to do it over in Pleasant Valley School District, and he was just a very, very stressed out kid when he was doing that, man. But I think that it's going to be very difficult for us to not focus on what makes sense as to where the schools are located, which campuses we decide that are the ones that we should recommend for stuff. From my perspective, it should go without saying that you would have to be charged with having to redo the boundaries, because then you have what the transportation department is going to have to do is have to figure out how to move the things around, what's going to be walking distance, what's not going to be walking distance. And looking at this, when I reviewed this stuff, and growing up as a kid, it didn't make sense to me why some schools were zoned for Ventura High School, and I lived in the Ventura High School zone, but it would make more sense for me to walk to Buena or ride my bike to Buena and eventually drive to Buena. So I think that one of my messages that would come from me is that you have to relook at everything and just really make a better common sense approach to these boundaries.
I cannot disagree with that at all. I just want to bring us back to where we started this conversation. When in your opening comment, you said that right now it doesn't make sense, and yet right now these are the operational conditions upon which we are running the district. It's equally likely that even after these other decisions are made, if they are made by the board, that there will still be some things that don't make sense, that maybe are more or less inequitable to certain people in a certain part of the city versus others in that city, which is why I'm just bringing it back to the grounding part, which is regardless of the fact that there are varying degrees of inequity or sense-making on current policies or practices. Yes, those are the tensions that we're operating currently within. Despite that, this committee has the opportunity and obligation to make the recommendations that you feel need to be made to the board for them to try and reconcile both our current practices and potentially our future practices. Yeah.
And redrawing boundaries is going to affect children who, even from schools that aren't closed, right? In theory. Maruha.
Thanks. I think I was trying to get in there to piggyback on Ms. Caldwell's question, because I wanted to kind of reframe what I think the bigger question is, and forgive me if I'm misspeaking for you, Stephanie, but and then kind of understanding what superintendent is trying to say. And maybe with this ship has already, or whatever, left the thing, but would it be safe to assume that the same provisions, accommodations, ID, transportation boundaries, walk zone boundaries, school boundaries would change or be amended in response to what this committee brings forward? Like, are there standard operating procedures that our subject matter experts in education will automatically do in response to, or do we need to articulate those within this future report that is coming forward? So forgive me, Stephanie, if maybe that's a bigger picture question of, is there?
No, I think you answered that question.
So we have to include it, because what if we don't, but it's something that we just don't know because we're not educators?
I just want to go back to my first statement, which is I'm encouraging you to include these observations in the report. That was my first statement. Where I was getting away from that is, if the conversation, let's pick an extreme. If the committee decides not to make any recommendations for any closures, because until these other operational issues are addressed, the committee is uncomfortable making recommendations, that's fine too, right? But it would still be based in these determinations. But the committee should not then be bound by the presumptions of current operating conditions in order to make or not make those recommendations. In terms of the statement that you just made, there's a distinction. So there's a distinction between board policies and administrative regulations. Some of the things that we are talking about, the way that we run the district, those are administrative in nature, and the administrators make annual changes to elements of those administrative regulations to the board, because we have to operate. We have to make the district functional. And there are administrative regulations that are changing all the time. Every year we have changes to administrative regulations. Some of the conversations that we're having, specifically related to like walk zones and distances, those are in board policy. Administratively, we have to work with the board in order to change those policies. And so my reticence being able to answer your questions like fluidly, what about this, what about that? We would have to do a comprehensive review based on your recommendations of all of the related board policies and also any administrative regulations that support those policies. Yeah.
I would just add, these walk zones are not just randomly made up. These, so the district hires a demographer. The demographer goes into the study. Yes, each school district may have varying walk zones, but normally these are developed based off of the NHSTA, the National Highway of Traffic Safety, and there's a section in there that looks at actual, like, planning safer bus routes. So it's not just a random walk zone. Not very often. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
Tony?
I have two questions, and maybe you don't know this because somebody said it was a really long time ago, but I was wondering, when was the last time boundaries were approved by the board? Because there's one criterion we've already examined that had to do with diversity, for example. It might affect a few of the other criteria. When the board decides on a boundary, you're looking at a neighborhood where students live. But you know a lot about that neighborhood. And so you may know that that neighborhood is, has more than one type of, different types of people, students, whether it's socioeconomic or race or ethnicity, whatever. You already know that when you establish those boundaries. So that's kind of a little bit difficult for me to understand that criterion, and having some of the schools have a lower score or a higher score because they didn't have diversity. But that's a determination by the board, the boundaries. So my question is, when was that done? When was the last time it was done? And is that relevant then in that criteria?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when the last time the boundaries were examined. Anyone here can remember that?
I am going to take an educated guess and say it was more than 20 years ago.
Easily.
I believe so. I will do some research for you, but that is my best guess based on knowledge of VUSD. I see, I was going to say 30. Yeah.
Because they changed it to make the East End Ventura
Yeah.
High School in my tenure here.
Oh, there may have been amendments.
I was just going to say, I believe the last time the whole district may have not been reorganized. It might have just been for high schools.
So that's that question. The second part is, again, a little bit more nuanced, but I think in general I can answer your question. The concentration of like what we would have called neighborhood schools are even affected by specialized programs. So let's just take our dual immersion programs as a good example, right? Our 3 elementary schools. Yes, we can generally anticipate the students that attend those schools that are neighborhood students, but we can't predict what would happen, one, if a school is closed, whether they still want to participate depending upon the distance. The second part is, that first part pertains to the individuals who've choiced there for the dual immersion program. Then the second part is the students who are, I'm thinking like Anna Kappa is a good example. Right, you have students who go there for TWI, and there are students who just go there for the non-TWI track. So yes, there are elements of specific schools where we could generally anticipate the effects, and then there are others where it would be more challenging. Yeah.
My turn? Okay. Is there any other elementary maps that anybody wants me to go into? You got that down? All right. So middle school's the same as the elementary, just more kids. I'll just go here to Anna Kappa. Balboa? All right. Same thing for me. So again, the walk zone is the green. The salmon color is the enrollment boundary. So, well, that's, I mean, Balboa is probably going to be right in the middle of the walk zone, I guess. I'm sorry, right in the middle of the salmon would be the Balboa. No.
In the green.
In the green. Walk zone, yeah, it would be in the middle of the walk zone.
So the enrollment boundary doesn't include grade walk zone? Walk zone? Like, that doesn't make, I'm not understanding that.
So anybody that lives in the salmon that's not in the green area would qualify for transportation.
But you have to live in the salmon area to go to the school? Or live in the green area to go to the
Live
school?
in the salmon, in the enrollment boundary.
So the people in the green technically aren't able to enroll in that school? But
Well,
they can
there's a
walk there.
little section that they can. And those guys can walk, the rest get transportation. So yeah, Balboa's a little weird because the Anna Kappa and Balboa boundaries are so close together. So, any other middle schools? All right, lots of information. I'm not jealous of you guys looking through all this. All right, El Camino, there's not too much in the high schools there. So, that is my little presentation. Are there any other questions for me? So far, wait till interesting Eric goes. Yeah, but wait, there's more.
Okay, Ari, thank you.
Okay, Ari said good afternoon, everyone. I'll say good evening at this point. Eric Reynolds, Director of Risk Management. So I'm going to talk a little bit about mostly traffic around our school sites, school safety. It's kind of a piggyback with Ari and transportation. The slides that I'm going to go over start on page 54. And I will just start by saying probably most of you either are or were parents of kids in the district. And generally when you speak to a parent or staff or a principal, they will tell you that their school has a traffic problem. That's been my experience in almost 19 years at this district. Most of our schools, all of our schools, have busier times in the morning and the afternoon. Some school sites have more traffic issues than others. lots of things contribute to those issues. How many buses are there? Total population of the school, how many walkers and bikers you have. All those things contribute to traffic issues around the schools. Where the school is physically located in the community, how's the access, what roads are going to the school, etc. So my slides include on the right-hand side what's called the Safe Routes to Schools map, which the city of Ventura does. They just redid these a couple years ago in conjunction with a traffic safety vendor. So basically these maps that you see are the suggested walking or biking routes to that particular school. And then on the left side of all my slides, we wanted to provide a couple of basic tidbits of information about every site. We did solicit input from all the site principals, and I can tell you we tried to be very factual with our comments on the left side, not emotional, and a lot of the comments are not necessarily from the principals, but related to issues that we see year in and year out. So what I'll plan on doing is just kind of go quickly through each school site. I'm not going to review the maps. Like I said, VUSD didn't do those maps. We were definitely consulted, including our school sites. Even the kids were brought in by the company that did that a couple years ago. So it was a very thorough process. The city is, super big into alternative transportation, and honestly, they always contact me for letters of recommendations on projects, and every child that we can get to walk or ride to school does alleviate traffic around the school. But of course, every family has differences of what they feel is safe for their child to walk and ride, and depending on where the school is, how far it is, those type of things. So starting with, so if anybody just has a question, just shout. I'm going to just kind of be going over the schools, and I'll just answer any specific questions. So Atlas, the biggest issue is there's no designated pickup or drop-off area, so we pick up and drop off on Jasmine. So that definitely can create some traffic issues on Jasmine, which is a community street, and on Darling adjacent to it. If we put more students at that school with no physical changes in the school, it would definitely add to that issue because you're going to add more cars. Because a lot of kids from Atlas, which of course is a K-8 now, don't necessarily live in that area. Okay, Citrus Glen, they do a pretty good job of using the front and the back for pickup and drop off. They've also had some recent changes with interior parking lot crosswalks, which have helped with the pedestrian use, but no huge issues there. EP Foster, generally speaking, oh, you think you are? Oh, somebody was changing it for me. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'll let you continue if you don't mind. Okay, cool. So EP Foster, generally they enter off McFarland and exit at the Avenue. The principal and principals over the years have worked extensively to try and get parents to learn the traffic flow and to incorporate Jumpstart students and parents and all sorts of other, to try and make that as smooth as possible. Definitely, if you add more cars, parents at that site, it would increase the traffic. Elmhurst, there's not a ton of pickup and drop-off area. We do have some buses to Elmhurst. That does help. We've also done some recent modifications and improvements in the back of Elmhurst, or it's really, I guess, to the west, to increase the size of the parking lot, both for staff parking and also to fence off special education student pickup and drop-off zones. So that's definitely helped. Juana Maria, we added a crossing guard a couple years ago. It was questionable whether traffic science mandated a crossing guard, but we just were at a point where the intersection of Crocker and, no, the one down, Colton. It was just, it was becoming a little bit messy, so that traffic, so crossing guards not only help cross kids, right? They bunch kids and parents together in groups so that they allow traffic to continue, okay? Overall, I think Juana Maria runs pretty well. If you ask some of the parents who go there year in and year out, they may have a different perspective. J. Sarah has a bit of an advantage over some schools, and this might all change as we make modifications to our ingress and exit and school fencing, but they have students enter and exit from a lot of points at the school. So if you have that, you have more areas to manage, but you also have more areas that you can go in and out. So it kind of can help take a big crunch out of a certain area. That's J. Sarah.
Can I interrupt you for a minute? With what you just said made me think about any capital improvement projects that might also affect what you're sharing with us tonight, like that have already been approved or are in the works.
So that's a good point / question. The city works with us a lot on capital improvement projects around our school sites. So a lot of these safe routes to school programs also include grants and what have you that have like improved walk areas around, like for instance, on Darling Road near Atlas. The county, I'll get to Sunset in a second, but the county did a huge Safe Routes to School project about 10 years ago with the help of the school site principal and myself. We really helped write that grant. The city has an upcoming project around Atlas as well. The city oftentimes focuses on pedestrian safety, which is great. Sometimes some of the things they do will alter the traffic pattern and can actually make car traffic even worse, at least temporarily. What I mean by that is if you add a crosswalk, then more cars are stopping at that crosswalk. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
If there's in regards to the crossing guard locations, if there is a difference between the image and the narrative, does the narrative trump the image? Because maybe the image is like an older, like hasn't been updated yet, and recently operational changes have happened that's reflected?
Possibly.
Okay.
These images are fairly updated. They redid all these a couple of years ago. We have not added a significant number of crossing guards in the last couple of years. There hasn't been a documented need. Is there a specific site in which you have a question on a crossing guard?
Yeah, in Juana Maria, I have 2 crossing guards over Kimball at Jackson, but then knowing that Crocker and Colton and Crocker and Telegraph are noted in the narrative, I don't see the little triangle guy.
So at Juana Maria, there's 2 crossing guards. There's Telegraph and Crocker,
Right.
and there's Crocker and Colton.
Right, but I only see the 2 triangles on Kimball and Jackson on the image. So that's why I was asking if there's am I relying on the narrative to trump
The narrative. Actually,
cool. I know, it's super small. I had to zoom in too.
The location of those triangles are actually that area where you press a button and the students from one neighborhood are allowed to cross.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
That's absolutely right.
So it's a street crossing with flashing signal versus a crossing guard location?
That is correct.
So the narrative, if there's any difference, go with the narrative.
Ask me and I'll tell you if there's a crossing guard there.
Thanks.
But she's right. That's a push beacon on Kimball. You're welcome.
I have a question, just because I'm an extremely visual person. What would be really helpful if some of Ari's information on the map, as far as feature layers, would have been added to the maps that you're presenting? Because I find that some of the numbers, like, bus riders and kids and all that stuff, I think would be more beneficial than the narrative that's written on the side. or maybe just having like, because you can do that with the map. You can add as many layers as you want, right? So maybe that's something that you can ask the city just so that we can see, or at least I could see where the routes are and what the kids are and all that stuff.
Sure, I can appreciate that for this meeting, but the city map is the city map, and the school boundary map is a VUSD
No,
map.
I understand that,
Okay.
but you do have the capability to include feature layers that are available to a map. So you can ask, like the city can reach out to like whoever does them with the superintendent's office or whoever VUSD, and then ask them for access to that. I don't know if you guys do KMC files anymore or what you guys are putting on here, but you can add feature layers to their maps.
Okay.
So, it would be helpful anyway.
Sandy, just so I can have some clarification, because that would be really administrative. After the meeting finishes, can I get a little bit more detail so we can reach out to the city? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we covered J. Sarah. We're on to Lemon Grove. Lemon Grove generally doesn't have huge issues. Lincoln is a school that we have several schools in the same spot as Lincoln, not physical spot, but same situation in that they have no designated parking, no site parking, no drop-off zone per se. There's a bus marked off curb and a drop zone curb. It does create challenges because sometimes people park in those curbs where for the buses and the drop-off. Fortunately, it's a small school, so not a huge student population, but if you add students to that school, if you could, it's like I said, kind of a small school, that would definitely add traffic to that area. Loma Vista, the parents generally do a pretty good job of following the rules there. That parking lot was tremendously increased in size about 18 years ago-ish, and that really helped with pickup and drop-off. Montalvo is kind of an interesting school because with dual immersion, a lot of parents drop off there. There's not a lot of busing there. Is there any regular ed busing at Montalvo? No regular ed busing. So, and then also Montalvo has done a really good job of developing school and student and parent community. But what that has resulted in is a lot of parents, instead of dropping and going, drop, park, go in, stay, which is good for community, but bad for parking. So if all the parking spots are filled, then that can create issues for people to try and drop off. So we're constantly working on trying to educate that community there. Mound is one of our most busy sites, and the reason is everyone who goes there drives. It's not, nobody who goes there lives in that area. And they don't just drive from one part of town, they drive from all over town, so there's not a lot of parent carpooling or anything like that. Additionally, we added special ed at Mound a couple years ago, and that additional staff has taken up more room in that parking lot between Balboa and Mound. So on busy days, like when there's student plays or something like that, there is less parent parking. So that can be an issue. Additionally, both for Mound and Balboa, the city all along Hill Road on the east side is no parking, and that's because that's the bike lane. But that creates traffic issues. Okay, Pierpont. Pierpont is, I would say, one of the highest percentage of walking, biking, skateboarding, etc. schools in the district. And what that does is it really, and it's pretty low population school, right? Small school. So what that does is it kind of really helps with traffic. Traffic is pretty well managed there. Poinsettia, that was another parking lot that was enlarged probably about 15, 20 years ago, and it really did help. But with the increase in parents driving their own kids, say over the last 20, 30 years, even with that increased parking lot, poinsettia traffic can back up onto Victoria Avenue. Cars can get going at pretty good clips down Victoria. So we've done a lot of work with the city with regards to traffic control, signage, marking of crosswalks, all those type of things to help with the safety in that area. Portola, they pick up and drop off in front and in back. Not much else there. Sheridan Way, a tremendous amount of walking community in that neighborhood, which is really, really good. The only drawback about that is they don't always use crosswalks. So you can't be cited for jaywalking anymore, but that doesn't make it safe. So pros and cons to walkers. There is, going on to Sunset, is no school site safety map because that's outside of the city of Ventura. But, and this is my bad, I take responsibility. The county, I think, does have a map. The county about 10 years ago did tremendous improvements in that area. They added push beacons to cross in a couple of locations, but they also added sidewalks all the way from, I think it's Ventura Avenue, all the way in the neighborhood so you can walk to Sunset on a sidewalk. So that really has helped with the walkers there. Will Rogers, we added a crossing guard a couple of years ago. Even though it was a monitored intersection, we were having some problems with cars stopping, and that seems to have really helped, not just with the crossing, but also with the relationships with neighbors, which is you want that to be a good relationship. Okay, on to any questions on elementaries before I go to middle? Nope. Okay, Anacapa, the city added a crossing guard and a push beacon just east of Mills on Telegraph a couple years ago. That was to eliminate jaywalking because people wouldn't always go all the way to Mills. The Anacapa does have pretty good busing, pretty good general ed busing. So I know some parents have told me the traffic there is an issue. I generally think it works pretty well. Balboa is a busy site, especially the intersection of like Woodland and Hill Road. Parents, the administration there and VPD, we continue to try and educate parents to drop off behind the school, but parents don't really want to do that for some reason. And so it really creates a lot of traffic on that Woodland Hill corridor, especially like say between 8:30 and 9:15, and then you also have Mound starting at 8 and Buena starting at 8:45 or something across Victoria, 8:30. So there's just a lot of cars in that area. Anybody who travels the intersection of Victoria and Telegraph between 8 and 9 in the morning knows it's a busy time. So we keep working on that. Cabrillo
Excuse me,
Cabrillo has
Eric, thanks. Jorge, so we're going to stop you for a minute.
I appreciate the feedback both on the elementary school and so forth, but being both a parent and somebody that drives in the morning, sometimes I wish that I would be more like the parents that don't care what's going on, so I wouldn't, I would have more of a carefree life. But the reason I have the gray hair in my hair is because every morning dropping off at Loma Vista has been pretty much a nightmare for me. So I'm pretty happy that my daughter is now going to Cabrillo starting in the fall. My comment on the Anacapa Middle School scenario, talk about a walking map that doesn't match the boundary school for Anacapa. So you have those beautiful crosswalks and so forth, but nobody that is zoned for that school lives in that walking distance part of it. So I appreciate that the city installed those those crosswalks and so forth, But I find that most people drop off their kids at Chase because that traffic situation to turn around and so forth is just the most complicated, not, so it would go without saying that if we were to make a recommendation to put more students in the school, that definitely a rezoning and a boundary stuff, and then revisit the traffic patterns for pickup and drop off, would be revisited. That would be my recommendation, because talk about, most, like going back to Loma Vista, the recommended pathway to the school is right in front of a hospital and ambulances leaving and taking off, for example. And then going back to the Anacapa scenario, there's just not a designated drop-off that is safe for kids, because again, for people that are trying to drop off, if they wanted to drop off in the parking lot coming from, let's say, North Mills Road, they would have to make a U-turn, very short U-turn. So that would be I would recommend that we would revisit with the City of Ventura Traffic to make sure that that situation gets resolved, or create a better traffic pattern for that. Okay. So.
Stacy?
I'm just curious if there's any significant data on injuries, accidents, things that are happening, especially in these more congested areas like Balboa Mound area. Is it significant enough that we have numbers for that, or is everybody fairly safe?
The City of Ventura tracks accident statistics. If you had a specific question, I could reach out to them, or you could reach out to their traffic department and find out the number of accidents, both pedestrians, auto accidents within a certain area.
I can comment on that, actually. So VPD, so law enforcement, all of them, they track all the service calls, right? So does the fire department. They all track. So I was going to ask too earlier, because you said that one of these, the county has access to some maps or information. So I would have thought that with providing this information so that we can have more of a holistic thing, that you guys would have reached out to them before presenting these maps.
I was just referencing the sunset map.
Right, but it had a little side note.
I believe
at the bottom of one.
Right. So sunset, I believe there is an older map. I didn't have an opportunity to research that. But again, they've created a whole walkable path within the area. But the City of Ventura did not do a safe routes to school map for Sunset because it's not in the city boundary.
Right. So the county must have, right? Someone else probably has that information.
I'd have to research that.
Okay.
But I believe there is a map, an older map. I don't think it's as updated as these.
Okay. I think the point I'm just trying to make is, if you're going to present a map, like have the map be a little bit more useful, like put like the streets, maybe highlight where they are. I know it's like they're tiny, you probably do have it in there, but it's like in font 6. So maybe just having like the point of reference, right? Like big large names for the street, or north, south, east, west, whatever, and then maybe just draw a polygon around like the school so you know exactly where it is. I'm just saying.
Did I answer your question?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to go and research it myself and then come up to the committee and give my findings. I want my question to be presented to, if that makes sense. I don't want to be the one searching out information and providing it to the committee regarding that data. I don't want to be wrong and present the wrong information.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, since it seems like since I'll be reaching out to the city, can be a part of that conversation. We can do the same with the county. And I know at the very end of the meeting, we'll look at the proposed dates. This is the reason that this committee has a buffer, so that way we can make sure whatever information you feel that you need, if we can get it, we will get it to you. So thank you.
And then before we get back to your presentation, I think Jorge's comment about the Chase Bank near Anacapa, I'm surprised that there isn't some text here about the impact of students on that property the way there is in the Balboa description, because it is significant. So I'm just going to add that.
Okay, I think we're on data, right? So, did we do Cabrillo? Okay, so yeah, so with Cabrillo, traffic is definitely heavy, especially at pickup. Drop off as well, but especially at pickup. One of the main concerns there is jaywalking on Santa Clara. So that's an issue we're constantly trying to educate on.
So I've been a parent at Cabrillo for, I just completed my 13th year in a row. And I have seen the traffic become a lot worse on Santa Clara, so much so that I've called the city and written them 3 times of almost seeing children get hit. And I don't mean like, I mean like slam on brakes, because if you go towards Lincoln and there's a church there, there is a crosswalk there, but people don't stop. And so what I was hoping for, or requested, a beacon or something, because even kids aren't jaywalking there, they're trying to cross to get to their car or up to their house. So this has all happened in the last year and a half where I've noticed it because I've been picking up my daughter. They since have put in what they call shark teeth and added another sign. I can honestly say that I haven't seen people really slowing down, because what happens is there's no stop. So the block where the first part of the entrance of what school was I going to say? I'm drawing a blank. Lincoln. Thank you. So where Lincoln is, there's a stop there, but then you go up 3 more blocks without a stop. So that's people start getting speed, and so what I've observed is people going too fast, and a middle schooler, not even though they're supposed to look left, right, left, they're kids, and they go out. And when I say 3 times, there's no exaggeration there. So I would have a lot of concern for adding any more kids there for that reason. I mean, the last time I told the city I'm about to don a crossing guard and get an Amazon stop and just start volunteering. And then which leads me to the next comment, that there's a teacher volunteers at that driveway on exiting, because when you exit, it's hard to see, and what happens is parents are so eager to get the heck out of there that kids are trying to cross to go onto the campus, and that was dangerous. But that has resolved a lot because of a teacher that volunteers there in the morning, and then there's paraeducators that volunteer in the afternoon. Those are just my comments.
I think I just need to add, maybe this may help the committee as we're going through the safety concerns and relocation concerns. When we come back around to it at the end and we start like scoring, this specific criteria is not, you're not ranking the schools on which is more safer than the other. It's either going to be this committee decides that there is a safety concern and they'll get like a yes or no. And so if this committee decides that at Cabrillo there's a safety concern, I think it's a 2, you would assign that to a school. And if this committee decides that there isn't, then you would say a 1. And so we're going to present that to you tonight based on what the narrative says. But if this committee suggests that, no, I still think Cabrillo there is some safety concerns, then we would change the scoring on that.
I have a comment.
Just going back. Sorry.
So I have a comment on this real quick. So where the narrative, right, it says traffic is heavy but manageable. So to me, that means nothing. What I would rather see there are numbers or some kind of stats on why you're saying that traffic is heavy but manageable. So I'm just, because this is subjective, right? Like, I'd like to see numbers next to maps and the actual data of where you're drawing these conclusions. That would be more helpful.
Okay. Okay. Data. So data has a lot of students walk to school. If you compare the percentage of kids who walk to data versus some of the other middle schools, I think it's a lot higher. And that does cut down on cars. But again, like most schools, there is a rush hour, both before and after school. We have made some modifications over there around the parking lot and around the crosswalks to improve safety in conjunction with the city. Okay, high schools. So obviously Buena and Ventura are not on here. El Camino, most of the students are not on the campus at the same time very often, and they generally park at Ventura College. So there's not a huge traffic issue there. With Foothill, we do have a crossing guard, and we had to add that quite a few years back because, like I mentioned before, crossing guards also help manage traffic. So they group the students together so they're not walking one at a time for a solid half hour so traffic doesn't back up all the way to like Telegraph Road or Loma Vista, which was happening. And then Pacific, there haven't been a tremendous amount of issues that have been brought to my attention over the years. And again, that's kind of a smaller school population. So that is the end of my slides, unless there's any more comments or questions.
Yeah. Okay, it looks like that will do for now with a few suggestions. So thank you for your support and your presentations, both of you. It's time now for us to take a break. So we're at 7:06. Let's do 21 after, take a 15-minute break, and we'll be back at 7:21. All right, we're ready to regroup. Thank you all for being back where we need you to be. And I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Thank you.
Okay, just real quickly, in the break, I was thinking about another student group that is protected. I'm sorry, going back to the transportation question, what are some of the other student groups that are protected? I'm going to use the term homeless student because that's the term that's used under the McKinney-Vento Act. There are students who, if they meet certain conditions of homelessness, there are provisions in the law that allows them to be able to stay at their school of origin, and we have an obligation to transport them. Very few students, in the scope of things, but I just wanted to say that was another student group that does have protections as it relates to transportation. But again, that wouldn't necessarily be a limiting factor if they needed to be transported from one school to the next based on where they lived. That same condition would end up happening regardless of which school they ended up going to. So thank you for that, and thank you for letting me speak.
All right, thanks. That's on.
Okay, so we're going to shift from safety, relocation concerns, transportation to now the fiscal side of the house. So what you're looking at here is each site, the enrollment count, and the percentage for each site that qualify for free and reduced price meals. And so this is just another lens that you could take a look at. I know earlier in previous meetings, we discussed the unduplicated count, so this is just another lens to look at each site and where they stand on free and reduced price meals. I don't know if everybody knows, right now the state is offering universal meals for everybody, and that's, well, the governor just passed and signed his budget earlier this week, and so that's still a continuing priority for the governor, even though, we know he's leaving office. We'll have to see if that continues to be a priority for whoever's incoming. And so normally free and reduced meals, if we didn't have universal meals, there's a federal income guidelines that people have to submit what we call meal applications. And when we follow those guidelines to determine where they fall, whether they're free or reduced. Right now, that doesn't play into effect at all, which is impacting some of our financials. So on the child nutrition side, universal meals is capturing, greater participation, being able to feed everybody. But at the other side, this was a data point that guides our main source of funding, which is our LCFF, local control funding formula, which is one of the biggest pots of money that the district gets from the state. And so it is having an impact because now families are, well, they're like, why do I have to fill this out if I'm getting universal meals? And so really this is one of the data points that we look at when we look for our unduplicated count percentages. So what we used to get was all the meal applications sent up from child nutrition to business services, along with the direct certification. Those are families that get, food stamps or stuff like that. So that was a point of data that we used to collect, along with what we send out and bug families to fill out is the alternate income household forms, right? And so all of those three combined would really give us a picture of who qualifies to being unduplicated and who doesn't. And that plays a great part in what we call our supplemental and concentration grant dollars, which when we get into the LCFF calculator, once again, LCFF, local control funding formula, the main source of revenue that the district receives, it makes up that particular dollar amount that we get. And we're talking like $21 million. So if we drop a couple percentages, it completely changes our fiscal outlook. And so the higher the unduplicated count, the more supplemental and concentration grant dollars the district receives, and that money is received to target specific student population groups. So
what percentage of families return the form?
Well, right now we're at 58.22%. In order to qualify for supplemental concentration grant, you'd have to be at 55% or higher.
What percent of families return the form?
Oh.
I mean, we're around like 98%.
Sorry, yeah. 98% completion rate of forms submitted back to us. And so, yeah. And so,
okay, thank you. That's much
quite
better.
a bit. That's quite a bit, yeah.
Okay.
But as a district, still, we fall under, and it is an honor system, right? We're not like double checking, verifying. I could tell you the political landscape changes if people turn it in or not. They're asking for sensitive information on that piece, and some people are worried about like immigration issues, so they don't fill it out. And some people just don't want to share that type of information for the district to have. But we're not like double checking the data that's provided. When we get audited, we would have to spot check and see if whatever that, we might have to make like phone calls to the family and say, hey, are you still at this income level? But we're not going further than that. But yes, the lack of people submitting this or just filling out that, just not taking their time to fill it out could impact the amount of revenue the district receives.
Also, this is a pretty reliable number. Yeah, okay.
So our staff, between now and Census Day, which is, I guess, the state day where they are capturing this data, would be sometime in October. So we're going to be working hard to try to capture all this. So you might see families might start seeing multiple chains of communications to please fill this out. I know it's annoying.
I apologize now.
Yeah.
It'll start on July 30th, just in case you're wondering.
All right, so 2026 adopted budget for the school district. I just want to start with this presentation just knowing that the budget is a snapshot in time, so it changes as soon as there's a certain deadlines that the district has to abide by. I don't know why that's so small, but, so just for instance, yeah, June, this past June 30th, right, the board, the staff had to present to the board what our 2026 budget was going to be. There was a lot of things that were still not finalized. The state governor's budget, which had huge implications. Every year it has huge implications on the district's budget. The state budget doesn't get improved until after our district's budget get approved, right? So just a week ago, the governor signed into legislation the budget, and so that completely changed our fiscal outlook from what was adopted a week ago or at the end of June 30th to what we know this week. And so we'll go into that once we get into the multi-year projection. But right now, what Joey's team, Fiscal Services, working on is September 2026 is the next deadline that we have, which is called the unaudited actual. It's a fancy word. That just means we're closing the year-end financials for the previous fiscal year. So Joey's team is still operating in fiscal year 25-26, while we're still actively monitoring how we're going to start the school and staffing. So we're always working at 2 years simultaneously. And so moving forward, enrollment. Here's a picture of a snapshot of our enrollment from 2019-20 to 2028-29, where we're projecting to be. And if you could take a look at the furthest right column, our enrollment year to year. We were projecting to lose in fiscal year 25-26 330 students. We just certified end of April. End of April is our certification for our attendance, which we get funded off of. We actually lost 350 students. However, the district is not funded off of enrollment. We're funded off of butts and seats, so average daily attendance. The district, I would say, is improving since after COVID. Prior to COVID, our attendance to enrollment percentage was about 96%. We're made some strides. We dropped down to 93. We got up to 94.7, or is it 95.7? Sorry, 95.7. So still not back to our pre-COVID days, but getting pretty close. And so we're projected to continuously see a decline, and that's how we budgeted that approximately 330 students. And we're continuing to monitor this. We have multiple checks throughout the year. We call them principal apportionment 1, principal apportionment 2, and an annual enrollment, annual apportionment. So throughout the year, we have several checks to see where's our enrollment, and we're continuously updating the budget. So same with the budget. So just because it got adopted in June 30th doesn't mean that there's not another check piece throughout the year. The next check piece would be in December, which what we call is the first interim, is essentially taking whatever was adopted and making all the changes that you know for revenue and expenses and updating it. And so you present it to the board. They call it first interim. And at that time, we have about 3 months worth of actual operations, expenses, and changes in revenue. So our fiscal year starts on July 1st, right? July 1st to June 30th. And so by first interim, we have all the major changes from the revenue and expenses up to October 31st. And then we project out for the rest of the year of where we think we're going to land. And then another checkpoint comes at second interim, where it's in January. Now you have 6 months of data of what is actually playing out compared to what you budgeted for. And then you make further adjustments and refinements to the budget presented to the board. And there's another checks and balance, another checkpoint at estimated actual. So throughout the year, you have multiple checkpoints of when you could see where are you headed based on how you've budgeted, and you have opportunities to tweak the budget to align closely with where your expenses and revenues are saying. So if there's a major emergency that happens and we didn't budget for it, there's several places in the middle that we could update the budget to account for. So when you see the governor's budget got approved, there's there's tons of money that came in that wasn't accounted for at the adopted budget because it wasn't finalized yet. And so at first interim, that would be our opportunity to present to the board saying, hey, this is what got finalized with the state budget. This is our updated revenues. And then by that time, we'll have enrollment finalized for this coming year, staffing, positions, all finalized. So we would be giving them a variance. Hey, this is where we thought we were going to be at adopted budget, but with all these changes, this is where we are. Just stop me anytime you have questions. But anyhow, going forward.
Okay,
oh,
Stephanie.
you do. Sorry, Stephanie.
So I'm understanding this page 83 correctly. So if you look at the 25-26, the enrollment was 14,112. And what this is saying is there was a decrease in average daily attendance for the year that just finished of 437.
So yeah, so if you look at the column
Days
above
attended?
that, so you go 14,070 subtracted by 13,633, that gives you the difference of 430.
So those are actual.
That's what we're funded off of, yes. Funded ADA is different than our actual ADA as well. The state has a lever where it reduces the impact of loss of revenue for the district. So our actual ADA may even be more or less. It could be more or less because how the state formula works is your funded ADA is your current year, your prior year, or your 3-year rolling average, whichever is the highest, they'll fund you off of that.
Okay, so it's actuals for 25-26, and then everything below that
Everything is
estimated.
projected, yeah. So 25-26 is, that's our certified actual attendance, and then everything else is projected. Right, so the next chart here is just, really, it's just a visual of what we showed in the previous slide, just continuing to emphasize that the district has consistently seen a decline in ADA and enrollment since 2019-20 to 28-29, projected to continue to see a declining enrollment. This kind of aligns with what the demographer's report was saying too, that he's continually seeing a decrease of enrollment due to a variety of reasons that he mentioned, birth rates, people leaving, just aging population, on and on and on. Yeah, coastal.
I'll just add one data point that's been pretty impactful for our parent advisory committee and then also for our community councils when I present. If you just look at the Ventura County State of the Region report, there's one chart in particular that's just really hard hitting. It makes a comparison between overall Ventura County population in 1973 to 2023. We have the double our total population from 1973, but the number of enrolled students in 2023 is exactly what it was in or I shouldn't say exactly, within 1,000 students of what it was in 1973. That's our issue. We have a lot more people, but the same number of students. And so in 2023 to 1973.
Okay, sorry, are we? All right, so this was just a snapshot of what was presented to the board and actually what was approved by the board, which was our 2026-27 adopted budget. And this is just a single year, right? And so I'm gonna try to go through this. We don't have to go through everything, but what I need this committee to understand is that you have two columns, right? You have the unrestricted, and then you have the restricted. The unrestricted dollars is mainly your LCFFs. As you could see, the source of revenue, majority of that is $189 million, which is our state sent main resource for unrestricted revenue. The restricted side is money that the district receives, but there's strings tied to it, right? So you get Title I, Title II, Title III, special education dollars, and so forth. We're getting money, but we could only use it for a specific manner. And there's specific timelines that you have for each source of revenue that you get, that you have to spend it in this manner by this date, report it, or else you lose it, you give it back. And so really when we're talking about the MYP, multi-year projection, we're looking at our unrestricted dollars, and that's what the state looks at when we're looking at positive certification, is to see if we could meet our district's needs and continue to at least have a minimum of 3% reserve. And I'll just give you a caveat, a 3% reserve for our district is approximately about $8 million. That doesn't cover 1 month of payroll. Approximately 1 month of payroll is about $16 million. So I am always pushing to have additional reserves because if anything changes, and there has been years where we've had government deferrals, right? So the state says, we'll give you this 189 million, and they break it out over the year in like different payments every month. But then they could come back some months and say, okay, we're not going to pay you for like 5 months. And so then you still have to figure out as a district, do I have enough money and cash flow to meet payroll, to pay the bills? So that way, if you do have a reserve, you could utilize that until they backfill your coffers. So here, essentially, for fiscal year 26-27, if you look at box E, after everything, revenues minus expenses, minus D, which is other financing sources. Just pay quick attention to D, which says contribution, D3. Our contribution on the unrestricted side has a negative $25 million. You're probably wondering, what is that? So what that is $8 or $9 million of that is for facilities. We don't have any additional funding for facilities. And so we have to at least put in 3% of our total expenses, which comes out to $8 million. The rest of it is special education. So essentially, special education is not funded at the proper level, right? And so what ends up happening is you have to legally provide the services needed for those students. And so even though you don't receive enough funding for it, you still have to pay it out of the unrestricted general fund. And that's why we call it a contribution.
Several of you have been in places where I've said this before, but I say it every time. Part of this deficit is not the state's fault. It is that going back to the initiation of special education law at the federal level, the federal government has said that it would cover some amount that it's never covered. I think it originally was like 40%, and it's never come anywhere near that. So costs have escalated. The state, in this new budget, the state's covered even more of that, but we cannot in our state keep up with and I don't want to say have to. These are services that we have both an obligation and an opportunity to provide to our highest need students, and yet in our budget we aren't funded to provide that level. So what that is this contribution, and we call that, we take a portion of the general fund to cover the costs of that fund for which we are not fully funded, both federally and from the state.
Yeah, so you could take unrestricted dollars to cover the restricted side, but you can't do the reverse. You can't take restricted dollars, say, hey, there's a year that I didn't spend Title I money. I can't, and I have like maybe 2 years. That's not true. Like we normally fully spend all of our money, but just say there's a revenue source that you get from the restricted side that you haven't spent, and you have like a carryover balance. You can't take that and pay for the unrestricted side. It's only the other way. And so that's where we are right now for our contribution. So about our district is about 12 million, 13 million that we're paying above and beyond of the revenue we receive for special education to cover those expenses. And so that's why you see that shift of 25 million, because those are considered in the restricted pot, not in the unrestricted side. And so
we're at 740, and we want to skip the next.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. I'll keep moving. All right. And so here's just a chart of what we use for planning and what's to develop the budget. You have the cost of living adjustments, or what we call the COLA. This is the dartboard that comes out by school services that lets us know what percentage of cost of living increase that the district's getting, and then other planning factors such as your CalSTRS and CalPERS, which is our our retirements for our teachers and our classified employees, how much the employer has to contribute to that. And then here is our LCFF funding assumptions. So what's important here is, once again, the COLA on top, the unduplicated pupil percentage is highlighted, because right now we're budgeting at approximately 58%, and then our funded LCFF. Out of these three, what we can control is our ADA, right, our attendance. We could push out strategies to potentially improve attendance. unduplicated count, we could attempt to try to maximize our household income forms. However, as students and families leave the district declining enrollment, there is that fear that the unduplicated population is the ones that are leaving, so that may get impacted. So in the following slide, as you can see, on the bottom of this, you see that 189 million is what we receive from the state for our unrestricted revenue. The next slide shows if our unduplicated count was to decrease to 56%, we would have an impact in the third year out about $2.8 million. And so, I mean, it's drastic how quickly the financial picture could change in just a second, right? In a matter from now until October, we're going to go out of our way to try to collect as much as we can. But if the reality comes out and that as a district as a whole, that our unduplicated count decreased, our immediate impact to that revenue would be about a $2.8 million in the third year out. And just here is some of the good news from the governor's budget. So we did get a 4.31% COLA, which is about approximately $2 million per year. Also, we have a new, a new expense that we have to account for, which is an additional 14 weeks of paid pregnancy disability, which we approximate, I think it's about $500,000 to $1 million expense per year. That's a new mandate, so we have to account for an additional 14 weeks of pay without impacting whatever sick leaves employees have right now and without reducing their pay. Special education funding, there's a historic investment in this year's governor's budget. Normally, we get funded about $939 per ADA. The governor is bumping that up to $1,342 per student. And so that equates to about a $5.7 million increase of revenue for the district, and that's ongoing for now. And so that contribution number immediately will decrease about $5.7 million because now we're getting additional revenue to help offset that general fund contribution. And then there's a lot of one-time funds that we're getting. If you look at block number 5, there is, we're getting a one-time funds for $12.4 million for student support and PD block grant. All these monies, that $12.4 million and the learning recovery LREBG funds are all going to be reflected on the restricted side, right? Those are one-time funds that we're going to be getting for the district. And so just jumping to the MYP, let me just jump to the MYP.
Yeah, the slides that Hassan is skipping are basically the verbal versions, like the words of the concepts that he talked about.
Okay, so prior to the governor's budget being approved, this was what the board approved, right? If you look at fiscal year 28-29 and look at the midway, there's a negative $6.8 million deficit that the district has. And if you look at the bottom line, that's our reserve percentage. And if you look at it every year from 26-27 through 28-29, we're essentially eating up 3%. And so the following year, if you add another year to this, it would go down to 3%. The state required for us, in order to certify positive that we could meet the needs of the district, would be a minimum of 3%. So we would still certify positive with this. It's just that you could see that we're at $6.8 million deficit ongoing. However, this week, new information has transpired, and everything that the governor had said he was going to do in May, at the end of May, it pretty much went through. So what we're expected to see this MYP, the second one, is if you look at fiscal year 26-27, that contribution amount, this is including the SPED funds. So I've added what we're expecting to get for additional special education dollars that would help reduce our expenses in the out years. And so with this new outlook, you're looking at a third year of about $1 million deficit, and our district reserves sit at about 12 million. I don't want you guys, I mean, this is a good thing. This is a positive thing for the district, but as I've mentioned in the previous slides, like, this is based on these assumptions, right? There's a lot of variables here, so if the unduplicated population drops to 56%, we'll go from a $1 million to a $4 million deficit just like that. If we lose more than what we're expected to lose, if we lose more than 330 students, our revenue would get impacted. If our attendance declines even worse, we'll lose even more money. And so, anything you want to add? Yes, sir.
Absorbed. Stephanie.
So you said the SPED funds, the 5 million, are earmarked, they're restricted only to that. So wouldn't that mean that the expenditures would increase?
No, so what happens with the SPED funds, you receive the revenue in the restricted side, but you're spending in excess of it on the unrestricted side because you're spending more money. They only send
So
you
it's
X
just making you whole, more
yes,
whole
yes,
than
you're
what
making
you were
more
before.
whole. Instead
Okay.
of a $12 million, you could just say 12 minus 5 would be our new contribution, right? Yeah. Joey, anything I'm missing?
No.
Okay.
So I guess when you were talking about the multi-year projection on the first page before the California budget, and you said, oh, our reserve is going down 3% per year, and that looked fairly consistent.
Yeah.
It doesn't look, I don't see the same.
So that's not happening now because we got about $6 million of ongoing funding.
Oh, I see, which is
And
enough
so-
to bolster.
Yes.
Okay.
And so what else, I mean, just want to add a caveat, right? So you have that 1 million deficit, there's a lot of variables. Also, what's not included in here is anything that happens in negotiations, right? So just want to level with you guys here, and any type of settlement or whatever happens with the classified and certificated in negotiations for compensation increases or whatnot will be taken directly from the reserves to account for that. So just to give an idea of the district, for us, 1%, say salary increase about 1.7 million, just round it up to 2 million. It's really 1.78 million, but you could see how if we say a 2% increase, that would impact the district. It would increase our expenses by $4 million every single year, ongoing. So that's
Just for clarification, that hasn't happened yet?
no, we're
Okay.
still in negotiations. Yeah. And the reason I can't budget for compensation is it's part of negotiations. Yeah.
I know that there's some properties that have already been declared surplus. At which point would you start accounting for whatever income is going to come from the sale of those properties that are in negotiations?
Okay, so we have 5 surplus property that 7-Eleven committee deemed surplus. We're working through several proposals right now with developers on those, hopefully to bring back a purchase sale agreement to the board to see if they approve it. And so even if those, whatever happens with those properties, whether they sell them or lease them, that money you won't see in the general fund. Say we sell a property, that money gets deposited in the building fund, but how it indirectly affects the general fund, because the building fund is there for, like, I would say, like deferred maintenance projects, right? So right now, like I mentioned, we don't have money for facilities outside of the bond. And so in the general fund, if say you have, I don't know, say the outside parking lot of this office, that's all, like, if you wanted to repave something, we could use that out of the building fund. It would mean less expenses coming out of the unrestricted general fund. So it really helps indirectly by reducing your maintenance costs on this side. All right, so okay. All right, so going forward, so looking at staffing analysis for all the funds. So this is everything, unrestricted, restricted, staffing analysis and operation cost analysis. And I'll pass it over to Joey. Oh, sorry, Dr. Castro.
Before we go to Joey, since you'll have questions about, may have questions about like, why is this structured this way? We ran this framing of this conversation for you by the board, and they approved of us giving this concept to you this way. So Joey's going to walk you through the color coding system, and the reason that it is this way is the board said, yeah, this is basically how we would approve going forward, determining if a school were to close, which personnel stay, which go, and what's kind of in the middle. So, Joey.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yep. My name's Joseph Burnell. Joey, sorry. I don't know why I went Joseph there. I'm the Director of Fiscal Services, and I've been in my role for about 3 years. Yep. So, as Dr. Castro sort of laid out, what we did is we took every single position at every single site and sort of put them into a big list. And that was our starting point. And as Hassan said, it was irrespective of the funding source. So this included all unrestricted and restricted funds. And then we went through each of the positions and we color coded them in a way where green saying that the position would be if a school was to be closed, it would be retained and follow the student to the new school. Yellow is possibly it might stay and follow the student. It might not. There's got to be some additional review. And some of those are based around like campus supervision type of positions that, you know, it sort of depends on the school, the layout, what are the needs. And then finally, orange are positions that when the school is closed, we would expect to be reduced. And we brought these to the board because we know that a lot of this is subjective, but you really need to know what school first, and then once you know what school, like I said, with like the campus supervision, at that point you can make a better decision of what the school actually needs. But obviously, you know, the numbers are important, so we wanted to sort of create a baseline of the red, the green, yellow, orange, so that you could see like what would be the potential savings for each school.
You guys have a definition cheat sheet in front of you. So this is how our job descriptions or job classifications pull up. I know it might not make sense to anybody in this committee. Probably doesn't make sense to me. So we have a cheat sheet of what these jobs classifications translate to. You guys should have a handout. But
yep.
Go ahead.
But to make it a little bit easier, sort of at a high level, all the positions on the column on the left-hand side are general ed instruction and dual language instruction. So they're all supporting the gen ed program. Yep, they're all teachers. And then everybody the column on the right-hand side is supporting the special ed program. And so as teachers, as special ed teachers, paraeducators, you know, if you were to, a school was to be closed, the students are going to move to another school, and so there would still be the need for those teachers. And so obviously the instructors would then follow and go to that school. And as San said, I mean, if you want to sort of go into any of the, you know, specifics of the different job classes, I believe that our HR software has a certain character limit. That's why some of them get these fun names. Going on to the yellow, like I said, these are ones that we'd have to take and review. There aren't a lot in here because we tried to make it more, you know, down the line, like these ones would stay, these ones would go. And so you can see, it sort of depends on, you know, paraeducators are based on the need of the students. Child nutrition, it's sort of based on the kitchen and what type of kitchen it is, and so what, you know, if it needs additional staff. And then the campus support is really based on the actual campus and what the campus needs are.
Should clarify.
I wanted to clarify that, yeah.
ELOP is our after-school programs, now known as Ocean, so if you're wondering what that is.
Yeah, sorry about that. And the reason why they have a separate classification is because they have their own funding source. And so they're all after school, so they have sort of different hours and they're structured a little bit different. And so whether, you know, the ELOP program could be supported at the new school, so there's just a lot more that sort of needs to be examined once we get to that point.
But doesn't that assume that the students enrolled at a ELOP program at a school that is closed, wouldn't they maintain their ELOP status at the new school?
So ELOP is priority goes to homeless and unduplicated, and then after that, it is based on capacity. And so capacity can mean space, but also people. And so that's where we sort of run into, like, certain schools, they have a lot of extra rooms that we can use, and certain ones it's a lot, tighter. And so that's where it's more robust at certain schools versus others. But if they were homeless or unduplicated, then they'd be guaranteed a spot in the after-school program. And so then finally the orange, so these are the classifications that would be reduced for the school closure. Most of them are the office managers, the administrators, so some of those where you already have that role duplicated at the other school. And as we go through this, you'll see the majority of the savings that comes from closing a school is through the payroll function. I mean, unfortunately, that's the side effect of it. And so we've tried to sort of, focus on those that, you'd be duplicating roles, and so there'd be no need to move them over.
Again, going back to the school that's adopting or accepting the new students from a closed school, wouldn't they have the same level of counselor need? I mean,
that's where.
Yeah, so the reason that and this is a great question because we had this discussion with the board. It isn't necessarily that there isn't a counselor. Remember that we have to comply with certain counseling ratios per the contract. And so no matter what, we have to comply with that. And the ratio could increase up to whatever's contracted. The concept here is no matter what, there would be a reduction. No matter what, even if more services follow to the next school, there is going to be a reduction. Because just like Joey was talking about facilities, we already have in some cases, not all, but generally, we have more capacity for students to be seen under the contracted ratio, because right now we operate under that ratio. And we can operate at the ratio, but we can't operate above it. Yeah.
Yep. So the next step that we did was for each school, we summarized their various job categories within and the amount of payroll associated with each one. And then we broke them into their green, orange, and yellow subcategories. And so within each one, there's the category totals, which show you essentially what your overall savings would be if this school was to be closed. So Citrus Glen is the very first one. You can see that the green totals about $3 million. The yellow is about 400,000, and the orange is 859 and 210. And so the 859,000 would be the potential savings, assuming that there's no changes to the categorization of the different job classes.
Those are just payroll costs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to interject, if you remember back to when I was using a round number of about how much is saved by school, this is how we got that number, that approximately, depending upon the size of the school, of the elementary school, it's about $1 million a school. Because if you split the difference, you have that 800 plus or take, you looked at that yellow amount, even if half of that savings occurs, that's how you get to about that $1 million amount.
Yeah. I mean, you want to just go ahead? Yeah. Or is there any specific schools you guys want to look at?
I think if you go to the last slide, we've summarized it all. I mean, we left it all here so everyone could see. But the last slide, keep going. This K8s. I just want you to see the big picture here, right there. So the last slide kind of summarizes everything in those previous slides and just captures the orange. And then Joey, and the other side is just the utilities cost for each of the sites.
So we have the utilities, and so this is the full utilities for each one of the sites.
Can I just ask the committee, are we comfortable jumping past all those pages straight to the summary, or do we want a minute to look at the individual schools? We're okay? Okay.
Yeah.
And so just point of note, if you go back to the Citrus Glen slide, right? So like Peggy, you were mentioning, like, okay, can there be a counselor? Can there not be a counselor? Just realize that out of that $1 million, if Citrus Glen was to close, the positions is the majority of the savings. So if the board does decide to say they need additional staff at that site, it would just end up reducing the amount of savings for that site. And that goes back to the transportation that we were talking about earlier, that if we realize that we need additional drivers to take up additional routes, that'll also cause these savings to go down.
Yep.
Just a quick question. Foothill's way more expensive than the other schools, but is that because it's a high school? Is that typical of how much it would cost to
Yes.
run a high school? Yeah, okay.
If Buena and Ventura was on here, they would be a lot more.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Oh. If you want to, yeah. I don't have it in front of me. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we saw when we did is that you can see the elementaries and K to 8s are about $1 million. I mean, they're all, fluctuate a little bit, but it's pretty consistent. And then the middle schools are about $2.5 million. Yep.
Is there a reason why utilities, what's the reason for utilities for El Camino being the dash?
Because it is on Ventura College's campus, so we don't pay for utilities.
Thank you.
Yes.
Why are utilities so much higher at Balboa and Data?
Older schools, they tend to be higher, and it's just sort of depends. I mean, I think that usage, and also if they have a larger after-school program, they might have them on later at night. If they have on the weekends, a lot of people rent the gym at Balboa.
And do the utilities cost reflect the recent solar upgrades that a lot of the schools have done, or will we not see that?
No,
savings?
This hasn't been reflected in that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
When will you start seeing that?
So our last school went online in April. And so now we're sort of at the point that we can get more of a overall district-wide comparison. The very first one was Anacapa, and it's been over a year. So with that one, we're seeing, we're already seeing the savings. We're seeing overall, like across the district right now, is about over the past 3 months have been about $100,000 a month. So we're definitely seeing some good savings. The other problem too is that, as we know, there's certain months where you get more cloud coverage, certain ones. So that's why when we spoke to the board, we were really hoping to get a 12-month cycle.
And then when do you anticipate getting the rebate from the state?
We're in the works on that. We have to first do the application, and then we go into a queue, and then we wait for the IRS to actually do the review. So we don't really have a good, strong timeline yet.
Sorry, so the question was if Buena and Ventura were on here. Buena was 5,048,436. Ventura High was 5,578,563.
So less than Foothill.
Yes.
No. They were $5 million. Yeah.
The cost savings
The cost
is
savings would have been
more,
$5 million.
actually, yes.
Yeah.
Vicky, you could pass it out. Sorry. We're going to move to the scoring and ranking unless, Peggy, you want to, it's up to you. I know we're at 8:07. I don't need you to do anything. Vicky's passing out.
Okay, the scoring sheet, sorry.
I think, is it agendized separately? Yeah, I think it's scoring and ranking of school sites, 19 through 24. Mhm.
Mhm.
I have a question. Sorry, why is it that this is never part of the original package that gets sent out with the notice of our meeting?
That was done intentionally, so the committee doesn't just jump to that packet right away and they focus on the presentation. Yeah.
If the meeting is actually announced, wouldn't the general public be also?
We upload it right after this meeting, or how quickly?
It won't be
Sorry.
tonight.
Okay, fine.
You keep trying to get me to just stay here all night. It gets posted when we post the recording, and quite frankly, it's because it's best practice, is what we were told when we went through this process with Schools of California, to make sure that the committee really focuses on what's being said during the presentation. Legally, it's not a problem for us to put it up after, so.
Just wanted to confirm, in terms of the Brown Act, the general public needs to have this when you have it. So they're not obligated to get it before you have it. So you have it, and then we make it available to the general public.
So 19 and 20 are together, and that was what Eric was discussing earlier. So going back to this, the existing safety concerns or relocations, right? So as you can see, it's either scored a 2 is a yes, 1 is a no at each site, and same with the relocation safety concerns. 2 is a yes, 1 is a no. We went through what it's highly subjective, right? I think Eric went through and talked to all of the principals, surveyed all the principals, got their insight of what they feel are some safety concerns at each site, and how would they be amenable to taking in students if their school was absorbing students. And so we've ranked this or scored this according to the information that was provided to this committee. But if this committee had a discussion and felt that any of these schools need to change, then we could do that as well. Like this entire 19 and 20 is highly subjective.
I have a comment. I mean, if I knew that my campus was potentially being considered for closure, I'm going to paint my school as rosy as possible. So, do you have any parking issues? Oh, no. And there's an obvious parking issue. Is there any safety concerns? Oh, no. And there are. So let's take that with a grain of salt. I mean, I don't mean to accuse my school principals of not saying a true picture, but I think that we should be realistic about this.
I completely agree. And so it was not only the principal's input, but Eric, who has extensive experience with those type of situations where the school side doesn't feel is an issue, but he's getting active calls where we're like, yeah, they said this, but really this is what happens. And so there was a combination. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. Yeah.
But
No,
this also,
100%. And we do realize that in this time, if you ask a principal, can you accommodate more students? And if they think that's going to keep their school open, they're going to say, heck yeah, bring them on. No problem. We get that.
but 2 isn't this criteria. These 2 are potentially affected by the calls for service report that we're going to seek, that you're going to seek and provide.
The honest answer to that is we don't know. We don't know. That's for the committee to decide. The other thing that I was going to say, to add to the fact that this is very qualitative, the other distinction is some of our communities elicit more complaints and feedback than others. And Eric takes that into consideration because on the scope and scale of things, we may have fewer complaints from some larger campuses, and we may feel that there are more complexity to that campus. Yet, if we look at a ratio of complaints, sometimes our smaller, less impacted campuses sometimes elicit more parent feedback for varying reasons. So just wanted to add to the complexity of determining some of the this data that you have to consider.
So criterion 21 is transportation, and this is as of now, right? And we've had a lot of discussion about redistricting, rebounding. Yes, all of that should transpire once some recommendations are made. However, right now, if a school was to close, would we require transportation for relocated students to new sites based on our current policies? And 2 is a yes, 1 is a no. And that's rated, so we populated that all the way across. Once again, Mound right now is a no. It's not a boundary school.
But Foothill.
Foothill is a yes, because even though it's not, we still currently provide. Yes. 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 And so, as we go through, so so the following meeting, what I would be presenting to this is a summary. So we've gone through a couple more criteria. All 24 criteria would be presented in like a summary format for each school site, what their scores have been across each criteria, and then they would be totaled out on the bottom, right? So at that point, you'll have 2 different scores for each school. You'll have that relative score, yes or no, and then you'll have the ranking score. Then we're going to add all those up, and that should highlight some patterns of which schools are showing up more than others. But still, that doesn't mean that this committee has to select those schools. And I could even go as far as, I could probably highlight the probably top 7 to make it visually appealing for this committee's eyes. But at that point, this committee is going to have to look, because some of those schools might be close in scoring. They may be off by like 1 or 2 points. So at that point, these little factors will play in heavily. You could say, hey, well, Atlas is at this score, and I don't know, Citrus Glen is at this score. It's pretty close. What were the factors which criteria really impacted this? And is this important? Is it not? And then this is what the work of the committee, essentially, you could decide the weight of each criteria. Or you could say, hey, for this X and Y reason, we don't want to look at any of these 2 schools. Maybe it's the 3rd one on that list. And so that would happen at the following meeting. And so now criteria number 22, we gave them all no's as of right now, because right now, as we currently speak, the board has not identified any alternative uses if the site is closed. Doesn't mean that there's not, hundreds of ideas of what could be at a school, but at this current moment right now, the board has not decided what to do with a site if a site is closed.
What are the restrictions? Like, are there state restrictions about what can be done with public school property?
So,
This is one where I feel confident giving a definitive answer, yes. So in terms of like surplus property, there's extensive guidance in terms of how we would use that. There is a consideration as it relates to the district's obligations to make it available to public agencies, including charter schools. And then you have recent legislation that gives school districts the opportunity to bypass other legislation that makes it even more available for housing. So yes, there are a lot of varying and sometimes conflicting legislation that says how a site can be used, but those are the 2 major ones.
yeah, I would just say those are all like processes outside, right? And so once the committee has made a recommendation, take it to the board. If they accept the recommendation, then they have to actually take action on the recommendation, which means all the homework that needs to be done prior to closing a school, such as boundary studies or X, Y, Z, whatever else that needs to happen. And then once, if they decide that the school is closed, then at that point, a 7-Eleven committee potentially would have to be reinstituted to determine if they're going to decide, if the board decides that they want to surplus this land. And only at that point, then we could determine if we could sell or lease the property. And so there's a lot of like steps in the process.
And I'll just add, we are not, as staff, we're not trying to create any barriers to your recommendations. One of the reasons why we are trying to just elicit your best thinking is just the things that we talked about could be years from now. Surplus property decisions could be years from now. A sale or a lease, even though we are in an RFP process, could be in effect years from now. And so again, we are not trying to be obtuse in terms of avoiding things. There is just no way for us to give you certainty as to what properties will be used, what their use will be, what the ramifications or constraints of that property use will be. And I'll just use one example. Asan talked about the fact that we have 5 surplus properties. 1 is no longer being considered. We're just going to continue using it the way that it was. 4 are currently in negotiations. 1 of those properties is this ESC center. And if something were to happen here, and that is an if, we then have to consider what happens with everyone operationally that's bound here. And I do not know the answer to that. I don't. And so that's why we're being as transparent as we can, given that where we are in that property use is also still confidential. Again, we are not, if there are things that we can share, we are sharing those things with you. And when we say we either don't know or can't share it, it's because we either don't know or can't share.
I'm just, maybe other people feel the same way, but I think what we are tasked with doing is making a recommendation that is emotionally challenging for the entire community, and we can't quite get our hands around it, and there's so much uncertainty about the ramifications, and so I think that just, I don't know, that kind of contributes to my sense of uneasiness. Jorge?
So with that, I think that you make a very valid point, and I think that one of the lacking pieces of information is what would a potential rebounding would look like, and how would that affect our decision-making process. So I like to approach this as cool of a cucumber, but also taking into consideration what actually makes the most sense and what is going to be the most practical for our students and our parents. And right now, based on the fact that how we don't even know how the boundaries will look after, or how somebody mentioned about the socioeconomic makeup of how these boundaries are made, makes my decision a little bit more difficult as to what I would like to recommend or how I would vote in a situation, because I would like to take those things into consideration, specifically the boundary situation and the walkability and transportation, for example. So I know that it's been mentioned that it's not part of our purview, but I think that as a concerned citizen and parents and so forth, I think that we really do need to make a comment about that.
Working with the demographers, I hear what you're saying, Jorge, but rebounding the district without deciding, like, that's the question that the demographer is asking, like, what schools are you closing? So let's figure out how we could redistrict this school and what could be some redistricting options. And so it's like the chicken and the egg situation.
Yeah, and you'll probably hear me say this a few more times. If those are considerations that the committee needs to give, you can give parallel recommendations. Under this set of conditions, here are recommendations. Under this set of conditions, these are our recommendations. Because what Asan said, the demographer, they are asking us that. Well, we can do that, but which schools are we rebounding to? Yeah. We can't answer that question. So completely just, again, you have a ton of empathy for us. The other thing to consider is and I want to be really clear, I'm not projecting a stance that the board has or won't have or will take or won't take, but I do want you to think about the recommendations that you sit with. You could provide these recommendations to the board. They could take action immediately. They could take partial action, no action. The other thing that could happen is, based on the recommendations or your comments in that report, there could be a buffer. Maybe it is implemented, but it's not going to be implemented for the following year because of the recommendations, and we do that redistricting, and then the implementation, even though currently it's slated for the 27-28 year, maybe that ends up being delayed because of the recommendations of this body. I don't know, but those are all equally possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like the committee makes a recommendation, then we could have, even though whether the board accepts it or not, at least there's a starting point where we could say to the demographer, well, here's the recommendations from this committee, mock up something based on this.
And I think we have to remember that what we just heard might be a tough pill to swallow, because we just essentially heard about job reductions, right? We saw a lot of orange. My job's one of those jobs. The adults matter, but the kids matter more. And that's what we're doing, is looking at how do we continue to serve every single kid in this district in the best way we possibly can, and the adults have to come second.
Two, it's not just a one-year decision. Like, this is a decision that the school district, you know, if they're looking to save money, which is where we started, we don't have a goal of how much money to aim for, but it will be a cumulative thing, right? And so it isn't just about today's students. It's about students 15 and years from now and further out. Tony, I did see you. Thank you.
First of all, I just appreciate the comments that were just made. It is emotional for sure, and thank you for that. This is a really philosophical question. This has to do with K-8 versus middle school and elementary. And I didn't know if there was a specific philosophy, and maybe this is a question that gets answered at the next meeting, or I almost thought about putting it in an email, but for example, when we looked at scores or student achievement, K-8 was not really compared, like the kids weren't broken out from the K-8s to compare to the middle schools. Is there a philosophy that one is better than the other? Is there a parent? This is really too big of a question probably to answer in a couple of words, but how do parents, you know, I don't see a choice school necessarily out there, but just how that works.
Your question is big. It is philosophical. It's also practical, and there is some research behind elements of that. So I'll just start with the practical. We have 3 K-8s, sunset, regardless of what other philosophical or evidence-based implications there are, is limited by facilities. Unless there were some investments, and I don't even know what that looked like, portables, sunset can't grow. Similarly, the growth that Atlas has seen adding their K-8 program, this is where I can add in a little bit of the philosophical. The board actually thought that double the number of families would want the experience at the K-8 initially. So part of our planning was to try and figure out how do we account for double the amount, but only half of the students that we thought actually took advantage of that K-8. And then you move to Lemon Grove, and I know publicly, you know, Lemon Grove has been struggling to maintain enrollment. It isn't limited by facilities, and so that's the intersection of the philosophical and the practical. In terms of the achievement, depending upon the era, the achievement data is mixed. I was a middle school principal at a 1,400 K-8 campus. That middle school was 600 students. So it was like to say, oh, well, this K-8, it felt, and it was enormous, versus our current K-8s are very, very tiny. I think the choice comes down to what the families want, what feels right for them. But in terms of achievement, generally, and this is a very general statement, generally, the middle school students at K-8s do perform slightly better. The reason that I hesitate to attribute that just to the K-8 is there is, as there are in other areas, selection bias. The families that choose to stay there and to go there may not be representative of the total population that would have otherwise been there. So I have to just put that question mark there. And in general, middle school achievement flattens, right, over time. And so statistically, it's the most bizarre effect in middle school. If they maintain the gains that they had coming into 6th grade and they stay at that level in 8th grade, that's considered to be great. I wish it weren't that way statistically, but that's how it plays out. So is that enough? Was that enough of a response to get what you were getting at?
It is. I have
Okay.
4 kids, and I used to say, please pardon this if you're a middle school teacher, but it was like, okay, when they go to the middle school, it's a parking lot. It'll be great. Okay, and then we get to high school. We get to go do things. It's nothing. I have nothing against middle schools or junior highs. I've taught in both, but I'm just curious. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
We're almost out of time.
Yeah, we are almost out of time, so
We could extend
let's
it.
just wrap. Can we extend for
10 to 15 minutes.
10 minutes and wrap it up?
Yep. And so
Are we
have
all good with that?
2 more criteria. So criteria 23 is if the district would benefit from a savings. We looked at that when Joey presented those slides, and so we kind of put that here, the net cost savings that add the orange positions plus the utilities. So yes or no is the first column, so 2 is a yes, so there should be 2s all across, all down. And then we're ranking them based on the highest score goes to the school with the most savings. And so if you look at Atlas, it's ranking number 17 as the highest, because out of all of those elementaries, it's has the highest net savings, as compared to Pierpont at $818,000 savings, and so that's ranking at number 1. And so, sorry.
You would say the most, so say it being Atlas, so it's 17.
So for if you closed Atlas, yeah, it would be the most savings, yeah. And just remember, it's not really always about the net cost savings. You got to look at all. We looked at 24 criteria, so you got to take a look at everything. This is just one piece. And then going forward to the criteria 24 is what you have here is for each site, your total unrestricted budget for each of the sites. And then you have the third column is your cost per enrollment. So really what it's doing is just dividing your total unrestricted budget by the projected enrollment in 31-32 fiscal year from criteria back in criteria 1. And so that's giving you a cost per enrollment at each site. So then it's ranking it. This doesn't have a score of yes or no. This is just ranking them, saying that the highest score goes to the school with the highest per student operating costs. So if you look at number 17, Juana Maria, in this situation has the highest operating cost per enrollment at $13,633, and compare that to Will Rogers at $8,259. So as you can look at the concept, like the lower the enrollment, the higher the operating cost is, right? So if you consolidate, when we looked at the classroom capacity in a few meetings earlier, you could tell that a lot of the classroom, we're operating at like potentially 65% capacity. So we're not fully utilizing our sites. We are declining enrollment. If you're looking in the out years, by consolidating schools, you're able to lower the total operating cost per student by consolidating them into small, like campuses, right? Closing schools and consolidating them into.
Okay, Joey, I have a question. Actually, yeah. Is the cost of closing a school and maintaining it as a vacant building roughly the same roughly the same for any elementary school? Or is it widely variable?
I mean, I'd say it's probably pretty consistent, but you're going to have you're going to have to maintain the grounds. You're still going to have the utilities. And then probably the biggest unknown is you're still going to have maintenance issues because there are going to be certain, things that just come up. Yeah.
So I could say like some of our surplus properties, like Avenue site, Washington site, we have constant like break-ins and vandalisms, and so we're constantly having to send maintenance there to do brush, like clean up the brushwork. And so, I mean, it's obviously still a less cost than operating a fully staffed school, I would say, right? Because you don't have the staff there any longer. Majority of the savings that comes from school closures, like I mentioned, is from staffing. 80% of our actual budget is staffing, so that's where you see it. But there will still be some upkeep that we would need to do until a further decision is made whether to surplus the property.
But there's no reason to look at schools individually for that cost?
No.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
no.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Kirsten.
So Asan, next meeting, we'll have all 24, all synthesized and all summarized, and then we can look at it and then rank them based on the numbers.
So the next meeting, you'll have a summary sheet of each school, and then it'll say like, and you'll have all 24 criterias, and you'll have the scoring for each of the schools in those criterias, and on the bottom, it'll total it out for each school for the relative score and the ranking score. And then you'll see whoever has, which school consistently has ranks higher, or has the highest scores. And I could go in and highlight like the top, say 7 or so. And then the committee's work begins to start deliberating. Yeah, and then you should reference, and then you should, so you have this in your binder, so you could always reference it back. And we'll be here to answer questions, and if you need information as to why a certain school site ranked this way, we could go back to that criteria and look at the data.
But it's
Sarah,
going to be,
pardon me.
isn't it, it's going to be ranked based on the data?
On this scores, yeah.
On these-
Everything
On the
that we
criteria.
presented. So it should follow. So whatever that summary sheet for criteria 24 says, you should be able to go back to your
Yeah.
criteria 24.
Yeah.
It should say the same exact thing.
So, I mean, for me, I have a different look because of what my job is, being a nurse practitioner. And so even though I consider myself a very emotional person, at work I can't be because I have to look at the data. And that's the only way that I'm going to be able to make a decision. And so I think that we can still note that, but if we're all going based on emotion, it's not going to get solved. A person's going to bleed out. I could go on as to why I think it's critical, but the whole reason, that's why we have the data, is we're supposed to be looking at that. It's hard because it is kids, it's people's salaries. I'm not saying it's not emotionally difficult, but I think the focus has to be on the data.
Yeah, sorry, Kristen. What I meant to say is like, this committee could look at each criteria and decide which weight to put on. Like, there were several comments on the education piece. Like, that would be a discussion. Like, I'm going to score it based on what we presented, and then would be the discussion of the committee.
Is there anyone else in the room, though, who is not entirely comfortable with having the top 7 or the top 5 highlighted? I think I would like to just look at it baldly, and then have the discussion from there. Or does anyone agree with that, or would you like to have it highlighted?
I think maybe a helpful exercise as we start off is looking at what does the committee weight as the most important criteria. I know there was a lot of discussion about test scores, and I know a lot of us were concerned about using those test scores, but the facility conditions, I think, is a really important one to take into consideration, because if there's a school that needs, $5 million worth of improvements, and there are other schools that don't need that much, that should be weighted a little bit differently as well. So my recommendation would be, before we even really get into all that, great, we'll get the data in front of us, but take a look at each of those conditions and say, which ones are the most important? Maybe we rank the conditions and then figure out how does that play out with the rest of the decision.
actually makes sense to me too, and perhaps Hassan, when we meet next time, there can be an opportunity for us to, subtract out, these 3 criteria because we've actually ranked them so low that we don't even want them to be part of the.
Yep.
So you could have a fluid sheet for us to work
Yeah,
from.
the next couple meetings there's really no presentations. It's just, here's the summary sheet and let the committee start deliberating. Dr. Castro, I don't know if you have ideas.
Sorry, why are we subtracting stuff out? I'm a little confused.
Let me interject because I feel things are heating up a little bit. So first things first, we're talking about next meeting. I want to thank Maruja, who already put us in contact with some city people to get more data. Sandy, we were connecting to be able to get some of those county overlays. So there may be some additional data based on this conversation. So we're not totally done with that yet. I want to tie that to my answer earlier, which is, will that data affect the scoring? That's up to you. From our perspective, it's not directly related, but if you decide that it affects the scoring criteria, that's your decision to decide. Before we get too much into what will happen, one of the things that we're already starting to plan is how that meeting will be facilitated. So these ideas are really helpful, but again, we can go as late as you want to go. We love being here. And I love that. Like, this is a second home, literally. But if you want to give us some feedback in terms of the facilitation, great, we'll take it. But just know we are already giving a lot of care and concern to giving all of you time to just, like, we're probably going to be situated a little bit differently. We're going to have to work with the recording. There are going to be elements of what you do that are not recorded. So that way you can be working in small groups and having discussions and then coming back to the group. We don't know exactly how that's going to work, but the intention is to give you time to deliberate as a group. There will probably be some posting around as you're developing consensus. I know there are several of you that have gone through like consensus activities. Expect that over the next couple of meetings. So just wanted to say you're going to have time to talk. You're going to have time to deliberate. You're going to have time to do small group, isolated events, come back and share what that looks like. Hassan's suggestion of highlighting something was a suggestion. It's, take it or leave it. This is your committee. The last thing that I'll share is in terms of data versus emotion. This is a broad group. You're all going to come at this differently, and the interesting thing about that is your entry point into a conversation may not be the way that you leave that conversation. And if it means that when it feels like, you know what, I'm really struggling with this, there's a chair, we can just take a break. Like, we can take a break, and you have another meeting built in to give yourself that time. So,
Okay. Jorge, did you want to add anything to that?
I would not want to see any color coding. I would like for this group to be given a heads up as to when we can come prepared with some ideas and so forth. I like the idea. I've been involved in several facilitation with strategic planning sessions and so forth, where it's plastered around the wall and so forth. But the flaw about that is that sometimes people are going to focus on putting their sticker where it's most popular, right? If we go that route, I'd like for us to sit down and flesh out what the consensus was as to why we are putting our thought process into a specific site. Not to convince anybody else, but just to really flesh out everything as to the thought process on this. I don't want for us to make a decision based on, let's get it out of here as quickly as possible. Because again, we're selected for the reason that we represent our communities for whichever, and we would like to be able to deliberate to them as to why that recommendation was done. So don't bring us with a biased color coding, please. So as much as that
I'm
might,
just trying to be helpful,
and then
but-
the other thing is like, don't eliminate the top, the better ones and so forth. I just like to be able to have a much more involved. so.
Okay, I have a completely
Kristen?
opposite. So I do want it because it's objective. So I want the numbers. You can just give me one. I want the scoring.
Yeah, we want the scoring. I was just,
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm going to give.
Well, I want the top 5.
Yeah, we want the whole score.
Yeah.
We want we want every school and every score, which is what we want. My concern was only that it felt like let's not make assumptions about these are the top 7 lowest scoring or highest scoring based on the criteria. That like I would like to just begin at the beginning and not have anything interpreted or even identified before we begin our conversation. But that was, we all have opinions. I was just throwing it out there because it didn't feel that comfortable to me. If we all love it.
They aren't highlighted now in the data that were presented, so why alter anything? Just put it out there, and if you want to highlight it, bring a highlighter.
Noted, no highlights.
You still seem concerned about the.
I was getting confused between summarized and highlighted. I just want to know what the scoring is, and I want
right,
like
which I think
summarized. Yeah,
I think that's what we agree. We would like to start there.
Yeah,
Okay?
it's a summary. It's a summary of exactly what I said. I won't highlight it. All right.
Okay. All right. Can we get a motion to adjourn until next time? Okay, there we go. And second, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much, y'all.